This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Happy Hump Day, gang, and welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Huss and Reem with you, and we got a packed one, a ton of hockey to get to today. Coming off a waxing of the Vancouver Canucks last night by the Winnipeg Jets in a game that featured a first period natural hat trick, a three-piece, if you will, from one Kyle Connor. And the KFC chants were loud last night at Canada Life Centre. Big win for Winnipeg. A very yikes night for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, the only downer of last night's game was that Connor Hellebuyck didn't get the clean sheet. I'm sure that will come up in the chat over the course of the next couple of hours. It is going to be fun, though. And listen, we'll talk a little bit about last night's game, a little more on just what is up with Vancouver, but more importantly, diving into the ascension of Connor Hellebuyck to the top of goaltending in the National Hockey League with Kevin Woodley of InGoal Magazine and NHL.com. And then Weaver's going to jump on with us. And there has been a transaction, which we're going to get to. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And obviously, more on the new look lines of the Winnipeg Jets, the performance last night. And let's look ahead to tomorrow and Saturday with Ken as well as the Jets continue this homestand. A little later on, more from around the league. And a little look ahead to Four Nations with our pal John Matisz of The Score. So buckle up. Lots of hockey talk and lots of fired-up Jet fans after a big win at home last night for the club. Just before we bring in Michael Remis, do want to thank all the sponsors that make WST happen every day. Our great partners are Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Rollies Transfer, Manitoba Battery, FansFirst.ca, Canadian Club, Wallace & Wallace, the Winnipeg Jets, F Apparel, Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, and we will get to a why not question of the day for the gang down at Not Auto Corp at Waverly and McGillivray. Michael Remis, what's going on?
In a great mood, Hustler. The Jets just dominated Vancouver last night, 6-1. Kyle Connor showing off those elite skills. Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, both up there in the league in goals. Connor Hellebuyck well on his way to a second straight Vezina. This is pretty incredible to watch here. And what a performance last night. It was almost too good, Hustler. There was no suspense. I mean, it reminded me when we went to that Minnesota game where, the game was over after very quickly.
Listen, it was a fun one, and yeah, you're right. That one was pretty much over. But listen, we're sort of burying the lead here. We will get to KFC. We'll get to Hellebuyck. We'll get to the win last night. But, Remis, I think there's something you need to tell the people on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Well, people were asking for this in chat. I didn't think it was this was a big
Let's
one,
go.
but we have a train to announce. The Winnipeg Jets have acquired defenseman Isaac Phillips from Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for defenseman Dmitry Kuzmin. Kuzmin's been playing with the Moose. Isaac Phillips, I'm going to be honest, I'm not too familiar with his game. He was drafted in round 5, 141 overall in 2020. He's actually played 56 games with Chicago Blackhawks in the NHL. He spent most of this year with Rockford, 28 games, 3 games with the Blackhawks. I have no idea. Ken will have more on this trade later, but this seems like a depth trade for the Moose. I mean, the Jets, Colin Miller skated today in a regular jersey. They seem to be pretty set in terms of NHL, depth defensemen. So I'm assuming this is a Moose trade.
without being able to tell you anything about the way Isaac Phillips plays, or where he'll be, why the team acquired him. As Michael said, he does have some NHL experience. He's played 56 games over the course of the last few years, splitting time between Chicago and the American Hockey League with the Rockford Ice Hogs. And for those of you that are looking for size, he's relatively big. He's 6'3", he's 205, and it's expected that he will join the Moose. So it's basically a swap of AHL defensemen for right now. But Isaac Phillips coming to the Jets organization and Dmitry Kuzmin going back to the Chicago Blackhawks. So we'll find out what Ken can tell us about this deal, what precipitated it, and where Isaac Phillips might end up. But it does sound like he's going to end up with the Moose. And just quickly, and we'll do something hopefully with Fink maybe heading into the weekend tomorrow on the program. But shout out to the Moose. Couple big wins in Grand Rapids. I think they're now 4-0-1 in 2025 after winning only once in the month of December. So the squad's turning it around again, much like they did last year. Got a lot of work to do to get back into that playoff picture right now, but a very nice start in 2025. And the Moose are at home Friday and Sunday this weekend, coming up against the Toronto Marlies. But as far as last night goes, Reem, I mean, you basically got into your seat. First couple minutes it happened, and then boom, it was Kyle Connor time. And 1, 2, 3 in different ways. I mean, taking advantage of a goof up, a giveaway by Kevin Lankinen. Mark Scheifele with a great back check to get a puck back. And next thing you know, the Jets' ability to turn a quick turnover into a high danger scoring chance and often a goal, especially that line, continues to show, and it did in a big way. But Kyle Connor just could not be stopped. And Remis, there was a deflection that he had, I believe, in the second period or early third period that was just a couple inches from being perfectly placed into the top corner. I mean, it could have been more considering that he had the hat trick and they were on the ice with 6 minutes left in the first period.
When a guy scores a hat trick in the first period, I know what everyone is thinking of. Whose name is on the Save On Foods score and win, Huss? And what's he thinking? Mention to that as much as us here. Do the other Canadian ones carry? Like Mike McIntyre tweeted out, I wonder what this guy is up to. I think his name is Victor something. So, I mean, 3 goals quickly. Running, what kind of night is this going to be? I mean, it ended up being a great night for that top line. Wasn't able to get 4 or 5, but he was close, and just an incredible performance. Natural hat trick in the first period, and it wasn't even the fastest one ever in franchise history. Blake Wheeler and Sean Monahan have had quicker, but the Jets, they had some slow starts leading into the break, and you saw Ehlers get on the board like that very early against Colorado on Saturday, and I mean, the game was pretty much done, and we were done early, and we were wondering which Vancouver team was going to show up. Was it going to be the team that won the division last year, or the team that's displayed some locker room issues and can't figure it out this season? I don't know. Did any of the options show up at all last night?
Man, they that was a lifeless group. And you know what? I remember, and I'm going to have to ask Kevin about this when he's on. That was a team last year that, to me, really sort of embodied what their coach was. I mean, that's how Rick Tocchet won the Jack Adams Trophy. They had 50 wins, and they played with the passion and intensity of their head coach. Nothing of the sort this year. And listen, we've heard a lot about the locker room issues with Paterson and JT Miller. And I know there's been comparisons that, I'd made a few weeks ago to kind of what happened with the Jets in 2019 and just how off that team felt. This is where Vancouver's at right now. And I was surprised that, a Tocchet coach team went so meekly out after being down the way they were. And again, listen, I know they were finishing up a 5-game road trip and, maybe energy levels were low. Levels of everything were low for Vancouver last night. I mean, they just simply didn't have it. The Jets made them look silly at times. and then absolutely cruised for the majority of the game. I mean, really, in the third period, the only suspense left in the building was whether Kyle Connor would add another one or two, and, of course, whether Connor Hellebuck would get a league-leading 7th shutout, which unfortunately did not happen as Nils Höglander took advantage of an unfortunately timed Logan Stanley blunder and ended up putting it over Helly on a goal that, Hellebuck probably wishes that he had. But in the big picture, it doesn't change anything for the win, for the season. But I know for those of us that are very much invested in Hellebuck winning another Vezina and getting the recognition that he deserves as one of the most valuable players in the league and potentially a Hart Trophy guy, that's a shutout that you would have liked to have. It was pretty much there, and it really seemed the team was playing for that for Hellebuck. And, listen, it is a game of mistakes and one mistake, and it can end up in the back of your net. Not that it made a big deal in the big picture with the 6-1 win.
We could have came on this show and said Hellebuck has more shutouts than losses. What a stat would that be? It almost reminds me of irrelevant, but what a stat that would be to say, and it just shows you what an incredible season Connor Hellebuck is having. You said people are invested in this Vezina Trophy. You look at the stats. Goals against average, 1.99, first place. Save percentage, 929, first place. Shutouts, 6. And he is in first by quite a bit. I think people are coming around. If maybe you weren't a Hellebuck guy before, but he's capturing a lot of people's attention around the league that, hey, this is the top guy. We're watching an elite talent. If you have 3 Vezinas, pretty good chance you're going to get in, get some recognition at the end of your career, whether here or, in the league. So pretty incredible stuff here. And, yeah, you want him to get big numbers. And also, MVP candidates being mentioned. Well, I don't know if there's any MVP chance last night, because I don't think he had to make any crazy saves, as Vancouver really had nothing, and the Jets have played this stifling defensive structure that has allowed him to make the saves that he needs to make, and he doesn't have to be, sometimes he does have to be play out of his mind, but that last night was not the night.
Well, and you know what I mean. The one thing that we'll also get to Woodley when we're talking about Hellebuck is the performance of the team in front of him, and. This has not been a one-man show. I mean, the job of the players, the coaching staff, preaching the defensive system has, made Winnipeg one of the top defensive teams in the league before you add in the effect of a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender. And, hey, that's a big reason why the team is where it is. Listen, I'll just get to it. I know there's a lot of people in chat that are already on this. It was going crazy on KNR afterwards. Yes, everybody knows how that shutout was lost. It was a blunder by Logan Stanley, as we mentioned. And, overall, there wasn't really anything that stood out in last night's game up until that for Stan. Ville, I thought, had a couple good moments, it's tough with him playing on that offside. We saw him trying to clear the puck on the backhand on a couple of occasions that didn't get out. But it was and I don't know, Remis, is it 2025? Listen, I think back to when, over the course of Jets 2.0, who have sort of been the whipping boys of the fan base. For a while, it was Mark Stewart before he was bought out. He was in a tough spot. And listen, especially in Winnipeg, when people make a lot of money and they're not pulling their weight, that kind of gets people's backs up. So I think I kind of remember that earlier on. But, listen, it's no surprise that there is a large, not all, but a large number of Jet fans that are not high on Stanley being in the lineup, despite the fact of what the record is and where the team is right now. And, listen, I will admit, I'm more often than not one of those people. I do think that there's better options right now. But I also think that what they are hoping to get from Stanley, you can debate whether they are or aren't doing it, some size, some toughness in the lineup. There's not really other guys that are going to go in and do that. But, man, is it just 2025? Is the volume of this now with social media and so much, is it cranked up to a level that we haven't seen in the past? Because I take everything on social media with a grain of salt. Being at the games, there'll be a lot of times where I'm seeing a bunch of stuff of people bitching in my inbox, and I talk to people that are actually there buying tickets at the game, and you get a very different story about their perspective. The thing with Stan right now is I think that's all meeting. And I'll be honest. I mean, listen, I was there at the game last night. As a Jets fan, I watched that play going, and I saw it. You saw it happening almost in slow motion. And it was like, oh, no, Stan. And then Höglander's coming in, and it was literally the first thing out of my mouth, oh, this better not cost Helly the shutout, and boom, it was in. So listen, it was a bit of a bummer. As I said, myself, a lot of people were really hoping for another shutout. Would have been a great story in and around the league. Hellebuck does it again. Otherwise, listen, it just ended up being a workmanlike 6-1 win. One thing that I had not heard, though, and I know Mike McIntyre had said that there was a smattering of boos. And again, keep in mind, this is a game that the team is up by 5 goals for Stanley. And honestly, I kind of felt bad for him. In our end, there was a group of fans that started chanting his name like the way that, you would chant the opposition's backup goaltender. And I turned to Zolt that I was sitting with, and I'm like, oh, this is a yikes. So, I mean, the funny thing is, it's certainly not costing the team wins right now. It is one of those conversations that we continue to have. We're talking about the 6th defenseman on the 3rd pairing of a first-place team that's steamrolling very good teams right now in the NHL. I have to admit, and I'll be interested to see how the lineup looks like, tonight and, on Saturday moving forward, as to whether the Jets continue to go this way, or maybe it might be good for all parties involved to give a couple, nights maybe off for Logan Stanley, because I do think some of this is getting to him. I mean, any player I think would hear some of this noise, but it just seems the volume's cranked up right now on it, despite how well the team is playing and where they are in the standings.
Yeah, and I got to say, like, on a 6-1 win where you had a natural hat trick, the top line is playing great. Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor are, up there in goals. It's kind of surprising how much of the chat has been dominated by the 6th defenseman making an error and, his spot in the lineup. But Matt Hyman says in chat, I think this is something that's been building for a while amongst the fan base, and I think
no one has anything else to complain about right now.
And that's the one thing, like, I've said this all year, like, every other spot in the lineup is pretty much set in stone. Like, you're not changing the top line, you're not changing the top pair, Pionk and Seabrook. So this is like, everyone thinks they have an idea on, hey, I know the magic formula to improve this team, and they want to weigh in, and they feel that this is it. So I think I agree. I kind of feel bad. You put in a tough spot, and you're gonna, when you're a defenseman, I know this when I play D, the mistakes get magnified, and when you make a nice outlet pass, no one is saying out there, hey, we got some great headman passes from the D tonight, ready to go. Like, you get all the blame. So goals against are going to happen. Certainly disappointing. Hellebuck wasn't able to get the shot, but it's a beautiful shot there by Höglander as well. So I think there's more things, Huss, that we can divert our attention to, but I think it's certainly noticeable, and Mike noted it and put it on X that, fans were, booing their own player after a mistake.
Yeah, it was, I mean, and listen, it's not like that has never happened before, but I just find that the climate around, part of the fan base, and listen, I get it. I mean, as I said, I literally said out loud, oh my God, no, this better not cost Hellebuck to shutout. And then the puck was in the back of the net. So I do get it, but it was just a reaction that, maybe you'd find that in Philadelphia or something like that. I'd never heard from Jet fans before. And I know people will have, and listen, I'm not telling anyone how to fan. I'm just happy that people are at the game supporting the team and out there. And but it's, I think it is sort of more about where we're at right now, a combination of social media and listen, there are, like, there are a lot of people that 98% of things will be good and they'll focus on the 2%. Now, in the big picture, we're talking about this team being a Stanley Cup contender, and that isn't going to cut it. But I think maybe, like, on a night where the team is blowing out the Vancouver Canucks and something like that happens, like maybe chill a little bit, because it kind of creates a little bit of a toxic atmosphere. And I mean, I think everyone wants the team to be the best it can be and to play well. And as I said, I think, we've seen a few examples of this. I was thinking, what was it, the Nashville game where, he had that play and came back and, was kind of hearing it, was smashing his stick on that. And I don't know. I'm going to ask Ken on this, but I think maybe a timeout might be good for the big guy. And as I said, I know there's a lot of concerns about what happens, depending on when particular defensemen are out there. Before we get to, let's get into March and past the trade deadline and see what Kevin Cheveldayoff does with this team, because I will admit, with a lot of people, I'm not sure that, this team and this blue line is ready for the challenges that are going to come playoff time. And again, we've seen a minor deal today, kind of from an AHL level, but I certainly do think that we'll be seeing some movement, and I'm not sure that the blue line will be as we see it right now, by the time things really count after the deadline and heading into the playoffs. There is a Tyson Ducharme. It's where we are at in society. Same as people yelling at retail staff. I don't know if that's the same thing, but the bottom line is, Helly would have loved to get that one, and that was just an unfortunate way to not keep a shutout streak going. But overall, 6-1. I think just about everybody left the building pretty darn happy last night. In particular, Kyle Connor and Coach Scott Arniel had a big smile on his face. Here's the coach afterwards talking about Kyle Connor with a natural hat trick.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Obviously we had talked, I think, a couple of weeks ago about our starts, and we've been getting a lot better at it, getting kind of out of the gate, and thought we did that tonight as a group. They made a mistake, not a mistake, but they turned the puck over, and we obviously, it was bang bang play right in the back of the net, and just like a lot of what we did in that first period, kind of got off in playing our game right away, and certainly was the difference.
All right, so there's Scott Arniel. Yeah, certainly a difference maker last night. Now, we will get into Cole Perfetti when Ken joins us, but a couple points for Cole, and they'd been few and far in between lately. He also hit a career milestone of 100 career points, and here's Scott Arniel on Cole Perfetti getting on the score sheet and obviously scoring his 100th as a Winnipeg Jet in the Bigs.
Last year he went through a stretch where, he's having a tough time, whether it was scoring or getting points, and it felt like he was getting farther and farther away from the net. Now he's staying in the fight. He's winning in a lot of his one-on-one confrontations or battles, and again, he's playing, making plays. He's getting in there, and and he does that. That's when he's at his best.
One of the things that Remis just mentioned, the huge first period for the Winnipeg Jets, jumping all over Vancouver in the natural hat trick by Kyle Connor. And, of course, coming out the way they did against Colorado, Nikolai Ehlers scoring 72 seconds, a really nice start for the Winnipeg Jets. Arniel talked about addressing an issue like some slow starts that have been creeping into the Jets game in the previous weeks.
Staying on top of them, I guess, is the biggest way. About just kind of drilling into home about simplifying early on, instead of trying to, make a high-risk play like this, as simple as possible. We know when we get pucks in, and you can, through video, through talking, showing guys doing it in the games. Our forecheck is real strong. When it is, when we're on, that's when the offensive zone time really goes up, and I think the guys see that. I look at the game in Colorado. I know we lost that New Year's one, but our first 30 minutes was really strong, and it was because we did a lot of those things, and it just kind of, we've been doing a lot more of it, and I think the guys recognize it amongst themselves, the buy-in to get off to a good start, your first couple of shifts to be strong, and that'll lead to, a strong period for us.
All right, there's a little bit more from Scott Arniel. Now, listen, it's been maybe the most fun development of this season is having a front row seat to watch this power play go to work. All year long, they've been terrorizing teams. And listen, whether it's at 5-on-5, Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, or whether it's at 5-on-4, they have been devastating. But Arniel expanded a little bit on the power play, their ability to figure out in game what the other teams are doing and exploit openings in the PK. Here's what he had to say about the 5-on-4 group.
I think there's a combination of different things that happen. It's your players, it's their hockey IQ and their knowledge, and they recognize that, that there's certain things that maybe in this tonight that Vancouver might be looking to take away. But it's not a lot different than our PK that all of a sudden, okay, here's what you think they're, sometimes they're going to this certain look and then they change it off, and might take you one, sort of run through it to figure it out, and that's what happens with the power play. Whether that's the players' IQ, the coaches, we make some adjustments that we see that might be beneficial to us, and that's all part of kind of on the fly. And I think that's one thing right now. We're sort of multi-dimensional when it comes to our power play. There's different areas where we can strike, and that's something we sort of started in training camp and mentioned about everybody's a threat, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, I don't know how that second unit didn't score in the second period with all the quality chances they got, but they found the hole, and they found the spot, and they got some great looks off it.
All right, so the power play keeps on rolling. I don't think it's a coincidence that the PK has seen a nice little bump since Slamberg came back into the lineup. Dylan Sandberg's looked great since returning from that broken foot. And now the Winnipeg Jets on the PK side have popped into the top half of the league with a nice little uptick in the last few games. Here's Scott Arniel on the Winnipeg Jets PK as of late and last night.
Yeah, I think it's cohesive. I think that we're moving together. We're in sync about what's kind of coming with the opposition. I think we're starting to figure out a little bit some pairs here on how we're working it. Big thing, Sammy's back. That helps that a lot. But I just think that we're taking the threat away, sort of recognizing the opposition where they're looking to go most of the time, and we're trying to stay over top of that as much as possible, make them go to plan C or plan D, and that's probably been the best part of it.
All right, so there's the coach, Scott Arniel, very pleased with his team's performance last night against the Canucks. And, of course, the number one star last night was Kyle Connor with a natural hat trick. Here's Connor on 3 quickies in the first period to get things going.
You get a recipient of a nice pass in the first one from Gabe, put it in, and then the next, just kind of being in the right spot, and, one of those that the bounces just seem to be going the right way, especially early. And, we've had those nights where, the other night we're hitting post and, they're not going your way. So just one of those nights where able to bury a couple.
Yeah, so you guys have clamped down defensively over the last couple of games. Are what we're seeing in the results kind of the example of good defense leading to better quality offense?
Yeah, you hear it all the time, and not from us, but around the league. And it's, it is true. It's one of those that, if you're moving your feet, coming back and taking away time and space, and, the other team gets frustrated. And, we've been in that position a lot this year where, it's a tight game and, there's not much, and we're comfortable in that spot where, it might take all 59 minutes to score the last second or something. So we've definitely matured in that aspect where you got to be able to play the game in front of you, but knowing that every single night that you can play that shut down, not give teams much, kind of keep them to the outside. The shots are getting there, hopefully not as great as many as we get, and that's kind of your foundation. Then you can respond, and the offense will come.
There's Kyle Connor, and the goals were different, and Kyle Connor has shown that he is able to score in many, many different ways. I got to tell you, though, the moves that he put on Kevin Lankin, and I believe on the third goal when he was in all alone, that was absolutely nasty.
Just a beautiful way, to cap off a hat trick. A breakaway goal, you're doing a couple moves. It was awesome. And the Heritage jerseys last night, looking awesome. Very, very well done. And you look at the picture the thumbnail for this show. What is this? Is KFC now at Canada Life Center. Some great marketing done by the Jets team and the chicken company.
Hey, you know what? It was bound to happen. I mean, everyone said it enough. And listen, if the Jets can get some business out of it and bring the great taste of KFC to Canada Life Center for people to enjoy at games, it's a win-win for everyone. Listen, just while we're talking about Connor, and it's easy to just focus in on the brilliant offense that he has. And by the way, after last night's game, with the hat trick from KFC and the goal by Mark Scheifele, don't look now, but Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, teammates, line mates, are tied for third in the National Hockey League for goals. The only players in the entire league with more goals than Connor or Scheifele is Sam Reinhart, who has one more with the Panthers at 27, and Leon Draisaitl, who is leading the race for the Rocket at 31. But big picture, what's made this team successful and what's made that line even more successful this year has been an increased attention to detail and intensity when it comes to defending. And Connor, while talking about the goals, also just expanded a little bit on developing his all-around game.
Yeah, I think every single guy in this room takes a ton of pride, and it's definitely something that it was a learning curve for this group. I think it's it's just years of building the culture in that, and being comfortable coming in the next day, win or lose, and looking at what we need to be better with, and pushing each other as a group, and understanding that there's always ways to improve, and just even as a line too, just kind of the progression that we've seen playing with Scheif over the years, and I think I think we just keep taking steps, and it's fun to be a part of.
All right, there's Kyle Connor, first star last night. Also heard from Cole Perfetti. And listen, Cole hadn't been doing much media lately because things have been sort of quiet for him. A big night to get a couple points and I think start feeling good. He talked about all the quick goals, and obviously even his teammates were pretty impressed with that hat trick by Kyle Connor. Here's Perfetti on that.
Yeah, I think it just takes them out of it completely. I mean, especially when you score 2 in a row that fast. I mean, 1-0 game, they're still in it, but when they score, KC scores a second and third that fast, it's really deflating for them, and we really just took over from there. So it was a really good boost for the group.
I know that he doesn't score literally every time he shoots, but sometimes it feels almost automatic. What are you seeing from Kyle on burying all these chances that he's getting?
Yeah, I think you're just seeing a guy that's super confident in his game and his shot and his stick handling tonight on that breakaway. I think you just see a guy that's in complete control, and he's not second-guessing himself. He has obviously a very high ability to score goals, and he's got that knack for it, but when he gets in those chances, he doesn't, get excited or anything. He's just calm and collected, and he always seems to, his shot's unbelievable. So, but then you see tonight he has a couple, the breakaways, great hands, the rebounds, a nice, catch on his forehand and backhand, like stuff like that. Like can score in so many different ways. So it's a treat to watch.
Right, there's Cole Perfetti, who had a smile on his face after getting a couple points last night and being a part of a big 6-1 win for the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk more about Perfetti coming up when Ken Wiebe joins us after Kevin Woodley. But just before that, do want to thank the great people over at Rolly's Transfer for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Keep an eye out on the roads. The new Rolly's WST truck is out helping Winnipeggers move to their next destination. Hey, Rolly's is family owned and operated and has become the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba over the last 60 years in business. If you've got a move coming up in 2025, get the white glove treatment from Rolly's and get a great deal for being a WST listener. Head on over to their website, click on request an estimate in the top right corner, and put in the promo code WST for a special discount on moving services and moving supplies, and let them know when you're moving, where you got to go, and what needs to come with you. And the friendly staff at Rolly's will turn it around quickly, get you a great quote, and get you locked in to make that next move for you and your family in 2025. Moving this year, get the white glove treatment from Rolly's. Find out more, request an estimate today over at Rollys.com. A nice break in the weather today. It's actually gorgeous outside. It was brutal the last few days, and not bad news. We're going to get right back to it, which means this is your chance to make sure that you're not on the side of the road calling one of your buddies for a boost or CAA. Make sure that you're ready for what's to come in the next few months in the teeth of Winnipeg winter. And that would be going down to Manitoba Battery, making sure your battery is great. You can get free testing at either Logan Avenue or Dovercourt Drive. And if you need a new battery for your car or your truck, shop local, get the best prices in town, and heck, the best service as well. Manitoba Battery will deliver your batteries to you for free anywhere inside the perimeter with any purchase over $60. It's just that easy. So give them a call or shop online today at manitobabattery.com, and don't get left out in the cold. And just as we bring in Kevin Woodley, guys, 2025 is here, and if you're looking to up your menswear game in the new year, get on down to F Apparel. I know they're very busy right now, getting ready for wedding season. Guys, if you're tying the knot this year, you and your wedding party can get a great deal on suits with a special discount when the wedding party gets their duds at F Apparel. And of course, it'll be a very busy wedding season, and they're already getting on it right now. So I would suggest you get down, tell them the boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. But for custom suits, custom shirts, chinos, golf pants, men's accessories, it's the best selection in town. 190 Smith Street downtown, and you can find out more or make an appointment to come in for a fitting at EPHapparel.com. All right, Ken Wiebe coming up in a few minutes. Right now, though, let's welcome in Kevin Woodley from NHL.com and InGoal Magazine to talk about last night's game and the rise of Connor Hellebuyck. Kev, great to have you back on the program. What'd you think of that one last night in downtown Winnipeg?
I try not to think about it from the Vancouver Canucks perspective. I think they don't want to think about it either. That was a bit of a no-show. And obviously there's going to be a lot of questions that come out of it, because I'll give them credit. Even during large portions of this slide they've been in, the Washington game in particular, maybe less so. They've been in a lot of these games, and I thought they were finding their identity again, which is defense first. And it was at the expense of offense for sure. Like Carolina, 14 shots they were credited with. Probably, I looked at the ClearSight Analytics underlying numbers the next day on that game. It was like 0.62 expected goals and like one high danger chance. I've never seen it like that. So they weren't creating, but at least they were defending. And that was their bread and butter last year, right? Like, they were hard to play against and they defended really well, and they've lost that identity. I think to a certain extent, maybe coaches thought it had been baked in after a season. And so they came into this year talking about how they needed to create more offense and do more off the rush. Well, they haven't defended nearly as well. So I will give them credit. Up until last night, I thought they were working hard. Last night was a no-show. Clearly something's wrong with JT Miller. I hope, talking to people that were there, that he hunched over at the bench at points in the third period, talking to a trainer. Again, just given the performance, and he's gutted through things a lot this year. And it's easy to dismiss a night as bad as his was last night as it looks like he's not trying. But I think we know this guy well enough to know there's probably an underlying issue here that's causing it. So, that was tough to watch on this end, but more of the same. The only disappointment for me was Hellebuyck not getting the shutout, because it would have been nice to be like, can you imagine at this point in the season, 7 shutouts and 6 regulation losses? That's bananas. Dude. It's bananas as is, but
it was in the upper bowl of the game, and that play in particular, there was a lot of groans. And I mean, for a game that was over 6-0, I mean, people can go, it was -20 out, people leaving the building. People are so invested in Connor Hellebuyck in this season. That was it was the one buzzkill of an otherwise night that was all Jets. Like, just your thoughts overall the Jets, because we'll focus in on Hellebuyck. He kind of can easily just become the story, but man, I mean, Kyle Connor, and the lack of attention to detail defensively for the Canucks last night, especially in that third period. I mean, man, did they get exploited in a big fashion?
Yeah, and it's funny because they were so bad that they've kind of steered the conversation away from a questionable decision to start, right? Like, they'd been in a rotation with Demko coming back and Kevin Lankinen playing well. Demko goes up with the back injury in Seattle, just coming off of Christmas. Lankinen gets an extended look. Demko comes back. on the road trip. It's his turn in Winnipeg. If you're going back to a rotation, it's his turn in Winnipeg. He's your Vezina Trophy finalist last season. And I thought his game was trending in the right direction. But instead of starting him, you roll Lankinen out there, whose only bad games this season have been when you kind of get into that 7 out of 8 range. And oh, by the way, last night was played 7 out of 8 because he came in for Demko in the Seattle game. And you start him ahead of. So that was a curious decision. And I know that the knee-jerk response is, well, he's coming off a shutout. Yeah, he's coming off a shutout in which the Toronto Maple Leafs generated 3 high-danger chances that have 1.24 expected goals. You talk about no-shows for the Canucks last night. I thought it was a no-show for the Leafs on Saturday. So that, as bad as they were defensively, and so maybe it doesn't matter who's in net, obviously. But Lankinen with the turnover against a team you can't fall behind against, turns the puck over behind the net, gifts them a free one, and then everything in front of him sort of evaporated after that. But again, I think it got so lopsided that people ignore the goaltending decision. I'm not saying you win with that, Demko, but it's one more layer of questions on a season full of them here in Vancouver. Like, how do you go away from your rotation based on one game against a team that didn't generate much? And what does that say about what you believe in both guys moving forward?
Well, a tough team to have an off night against, and especially if the goaltending decision is iffy and you play the way they did in front of their goaltender, it can be a disaster. What have you thought about the Scheifele-Connor line? I mean, tied now, those two players tied for third in goals right now in the National Hockey League. But the addition of Gabriel Velarde, I mean, we've seen some circus passes from Gabe. When those guys are going at times, we joke that it's the NHL's version of the Harlem Globetrotters at times. And unfortunately for Vancouver, when they stepped off the gas last night and, just gave them a little bit, it was in the back of the net before they even realized it.
Well, I mean, yeah, you've got to, those guys are so good, you can't give them space. And I mean, again, the freebie on the puck handling turnover, and that's a rare mistake for Kevin Lankinen. And again, which points me to when a guy plays uncharacteristically, is it fatigue? But then, the defensive zone coverage on the odd man rush, to give up the odd man rush in the first place. And then, against that line, against that team, but against that line in particular. And then the breakdowns on the breakaway, just giving them away. And it's one thing to make mistakes, and another thing to make mistakes one after the other against the best players in the league. And I've always been a massive, I was going to say Kyle Connor fan, but as a goaltender, he actually kind of makes me just twitch a little bit, right? I wouldn't want to be facing that. His shot's so good. He's got so much skill. He's so deceptive, and he makes it look so easy. Kind of feel like he's one of the more underrated goalie nightmare fuels in the league. I don't think anyone wants to face him sort of in one-on-one. And the Canucks present him all kinds of opportunities in time and space. He's going to bury on anyone. Again, not sure it matters if it's Lankinen or Demko. But you just can't gift them opportunities like that. And that was, again, I'm kind of at a loss a little bit. I apologize. I'm at a bit of a loss for words for some of what we saw from the Vancouver Canucks last night.
Just before we kind of focus in on Hellebuck's season, I do want to ask you one on the Canucks. That team last year that won 50 games and, got to game 7 in the second round with Edmonton, they seem to have a real identity and a real level of fight in themselves. I mean, that was how they got to that position. No one expected them to be where they were, and they just stayed there for 82 games and then made something happen in the postseason. Last night, it was a terrible start, but I thought there might be some sort of response, at least some level of emotion from Vancouver. And in a lot of ways, I mean, once we got to the second period and nothing really changed, it was sort of like a white towel. I mean, how different is the identity of this team this year, considering all the drama that we hear about on a daily basis, and how's that affecting what we see on the ice from the Canucks?
Well, they kind of went quietly into the night, right? End of a 5-game road trip, so I'll grant them that. It got away from it, and the way they're offensively right now, they're not creating anything. So you get down 3-4-0, especially the fourth one. That's it, right? They don't got that pushback in them, and they were a comeback team in the past. Listen, there's two things here. One, I talked about the defensive identity. That's what they were. That was the staple. That was what they hung their hat on last year. And it surprised some teams because coming out of the Boudreau era, right, it was run and gun and wide open and trading chances. And it didn't matter who was leading in the third period. Either way, the game wasn't over. This year, they've kind of lost that. They're still not bad defensively. Like, they're flirting with a top 10 defensive team on the underlying metrics. But last year, they were top 3. And so that part of the identity has certainly waned. The other part is that the defensive efforts that they had last year, a large part of it was based on not defending. They spent prolonged periods in the offensive zone grinding away on teams on the forecheck. How much of that did you see last night? It's a hard way to play. It requires a really high work ethic, and that's kind of faded on them. They don't have the forecheck game that they had in the past. And so you combine, because like, let's be honest, this is 2 different teams, with Quinn Hughes and without Quinn Hughes. And when Quinn's on the ice, the numbers sort of point to an elite team, like a team that could challenge anyone. When he's off the ice, the underlying numbers trend more towards a lottery team, a team that could be looking for a number 1 pick this year. And so the bottom 4 on defense is so exposed, and they used to counter that by not making them defend. They spent large chunks of their ice time in the other end, just grinding away on the cycle, not necessarily creating a time, but just wearing teams down. And now, whether it's a change in some of the personnel up front, a lack of willingness, like I said, that's a hard way to play, especially for 82 games, but they're just not doing it. And so a defense that has gotten weaker in the offseason, and management has to bear some of the blame there for some of the changes they made that haven't panned out, and some of the signings that haven't panned out, is more exposed by rush chances, because when they are forechecking, they're making mistakes that are leading to rushes like what we saw Winnipeg open them up last night, and more time in their own end, because the 4 guys they got after Quinn Hughes is off the ice on defense aren't breaking the puck out either. So, like, I think a lot of this, their identity has faded from last year, and how much of that is we're not willing to do the work we were willing to do last year. Teams aren't overlooking us like they did last year. They're doing the work defensively that maybe they didn't last year because, hey, it's the Canucks, it's an easy 2 points. And that had been, let's be honest, for a long time, that was the way teams viewed them. Or that plus combined with personnel changes that don't allow them to play that year. Like, if Quinn Hughes isn't on the ice, this team doesn't get out of its own end very well, and it doesn't defend through the neutral zone very well. And that's a pretty bad recipe.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season goes, whether the Canucks will be in and left standing in the 8 teams in the Western Conference playoffs. Kevin, of course, we've been talking for years through your work with InGoal Magazine about goaltending in particular. We've talked with you about Connor Hellebuyck for many years. As we do this interview today, he is on the verge of back-to-back Vezina trophies, a third, and absolutely is and should be a candidate for the Hart Trophy. Just your thoughts on the evolution of Connor, and just how good is Connor Hellebuyck right now in the National Hockey League with what he's doing for the Winnipeg Jets?
Well, he's exceptional, right? Like, I mean, you run out of superlatives. He's leading the league he's leading the league in goals saved above expected. Now, here's the thing. There's 2 sides to this, right? Like, and don't let the second one take away anything from what Hellebuyck is doing. It's remarkable, because I think the belief he instills in the team plays a role in this. But they are also defending at an elite level right now. Expected goals against off high danger chances, which is what matters the most at 5-on-5 and typically bodes most important come playoff time. They're second in the National Hockey League. High danger rush chances, 5-on-5. They're 4th in the National Hockey League against. D-zone, they're mid-pack, 15th, and PK, they're 18th, and that's where he had to do his best work. But those are the freebies, right? Like, the expected goals against 5-on-5 is a big one, and then the freebies are when you're giving up stuff off the rush, and they're not doing either one of those. So when I look at ClearSight's numbers on the season for, totals for all the goalies, like him and Logan Thompson are actually neck and neck. So as much as the Vezina Trophy is Connor Hellebuyck slam dunk, no arguments, because a lot of the raw numbers and because of the history, there are other goalies who are at least in the conversation in terms of what they're doing relative to their environment. They're being just as impactful right now, at least statistically. But what Helly's doing, like the shutouts, the numbers, the amount he's playing, like Logan Thompson's right there from a goal save perspective in fewer games. So you can argue, and the numbers show it on a per shot basis, he's actually been a little better. But to do it as often as Hellebuyck is doing it, the ability to play as often as he is and retain that level of consistency, like we just don't see that. And you've heard me talk in the past about like, okay, some of the underlying numbers on different types of plays, what's happened in the playoffs in the past. I think he's so good at so many things that anything that he's average at becomes a relative weakness. And so you've seen in the playoffs, teams have tried to expose him east-west, side-to-side, lateral plays, slot line plays, as Clearsight calls them. To me, one of the most promising things about his year this season is he's actually near the top of the league in those numbers. And that's not normally the case. He's already 6 goals above expected on slot line plays alone. Screens is the only thing where he's even close to league average. Everything else is off the charts. So to me, it's the brilliance he brings on an annual basis, but also the desire to continue improving, right? Like, so he's always looking to get better. And, we had a deep dive on this at NHL.com and at InGoal as well. Like, what goes into this? And it's kind of, to me, it's his attitude, it's his brain, the way he processes. I've heard other people talk about the way he reads and anticipates the game is at an otherworldly level. I used it in the article I wrote. Dominic Hasek, they used to say, had the brain like a computer and the body like a slinky, and that's how he played goal. Helly clearly has the brain like a computer, and he's computing things at levels that nobody else is doing in the league right now. Like, his ability to read and anticipate plays is just otherworldly. I've talked to Comrie about it. I've talked to Flaherty about it. We've done that video with Hellebuck where he does pro reads with InGoalMag.com. So the goalies sit down and do video with us and review how they see plays. And we did that with Connor last summer. And I'm telling you, like, odd man rushes are coming over the blue line. And he's not only telling you if the guy's shooting or passing, he's telling you where he's shooting. Like, it's unreal. Like, I know he's shooting here based on this, and hand position, hip position, where he's looking, how his feet are. It's unbelievable. And Flats has told me the same thing when they're in their video sessions. Like, there are times where he'll be like, hey, you're like a little deep. This is one of the quotes I use. Hey, I'll be like, hey, why are you so deep here? And Flats has played and coached a long time in the league, and he's like thinking, hey, you're a little deep here. And Connor's like, no, see this over here? Like, I think this is going here next. And that's why and he's just, they used to say Hasek like a chessboard. He was one step ahead of the opponents. And I kind of think Helly's hit that point in the league right now. So absolutely slam dunk. It's going to take, Mackenzie Blackwood getting on the heater of all heaters in the second half behind a similarly great defensive team for anyone to have a chance to catch Helly in the Vezina Trophy race. And it's fun to watch.
Hey,
big and boring is still fun in goalie world.
No one's complaining here in the Peg. I will tell you that, Kevin. Listen, your analysis of the position is on a whole nother level from most people in the media. So I'll ask you this: you've watched Connor Hellebuck, and he's famously devoted. I mean, the guy works on everything to be better, and we've seen it before. Like, from a casual fan's version, maybe the best example of is his puck handling. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, Helly with the puck, it was like a hand grenade with the pin pulled. And everyone was, just sort of nervous. We joked about the Paul Maurice shock collar for him when he went out. Well, that completely changed over a couple years. That's just one aspect of it. As far as the overall position, when you look at Hellebuck today as opposed to 4, 5, 6 years ago, where has he improved the most? And what can other goalies learn from the evolution of Connor Hellebuck?
Oh, that's a really good question. I love the puck handling example as well, because you don't need to be Marty Brodeur, but you got to get out of your net and set up your guys, right? Like, you got to be able to stop it and set it up and make simple short plays. You don't need to be Mike Smith chucking it up the ice or Marty Brodeur leading breakaways, and that's a great example. It's interesting, like how much of the reads is just experience. It was a question that we had as part of the conversations about that story, because you see the work technically, you see the work physically that he's done with Adam Francilia, and you see how that, lends itself to his game. You're starting to see other goalies reach out to Adam, and then you start to see elements of Helly in their game. Watch Andrei Vasilevsky, and at times the way he's narrowed his stance and some of his movements, and those things are all intertwined. The way he keeps it simple, and I honestly don't, and talking to people around him, they don't have the answer. Like, how much of it is just the experience, so the reads have hit another level. He just knows what's coming. But then the faith in all the work he does. And I know it frustrated people to hear him say after the playoffs last year that he felt like he was in a good spot, that his game was fine. But the faith that the work he does will translate on the ice is so important, right? Like that belief that all these things he does, the work off the ice, the work on the ice, the work, like that it's all going to translate. You have to have a belief in it. And so it's really hard to sort of come up with a tangible for you, because technically I don't know that it's changed that much. Like there are elements for sure that have changed. He's got this little thing he's doing, like a little half RVH to sort of preload into the post on net drives that I saw last night that I had an eye out for. That's like, that's not just new to him in the last couple of years, but that's something that might, again, you might see other goalies copying that. So there is this constant work ethic, this constant evolution of him as a goaltender, but I don't think it's radical. Like he hasn't had to reinvent the wheel in his game so much as just reaffirm his belief in his game year after year and that this is going to work. And yet there are elements of it that other people are trying to increasingly mimic and imitate, big and boring. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't know that I have a firm, absolute, this is what's changed answer. It's just the kind of constant evolution. A lot of it may be just the experience that allows him to read the game at this level. I will say that talking to some people close to him, that way that he approaches it. And I know his dad had that story about looking at sticks and stick blades when he was really young. Because if I can figure this out, and that goes back to the reads. If I can figure this out, I know where they're going to shoot. And he does that at a level no one else is doing it. But there's a technician element to it that is a part of, evidently, of everything he does, including fishing. Like, evidently it's not fun. Like, it's a getaway, but it's, he's not a fun fisherman. He goes out and like everything is very technical. But that mindset, and this is what makes him so unique, like that mindset, it kind of fuels his game too. Like it's part of everything he does. And so Flats will talk about him, getting some time away from the rink and not at the rink and then bringing back. And he knows that he's in that, like he doesn't lose that mindset. And so again, I think it all comes back to, and maybe this is why I'm struggling to come up with a firm answer for you, because as much as we appreciate the physical work he's done, as much as we appreciate the technical efficiency that he brings to the game, again, like the Hasek comparison, the thing that truly separates him may be his mind and his approach.
Hey, Kevin Woodley's with us at InGoal Magazine, NHL.com out in Vancouver. Before we go, and while we're cheering on all these Hellebuck victories in Winnipeg, that's going to be paused for a couple weeks when he's on the other side playing for Team USA in the Four Nations. I'll just ask you quickly, how big is the gap for Canada's goaltending amongst the rest of the tournament? And can our guys in the red and white, can they get the job done in your mind?
Yeah, they can. I mean, absolutely they can, right? Like, do we have a list of, Hellebuck, Ottinger, Swayman, Demko? Although, Swayman's not having the year you would hope, Demko's not having the year but like you look at the American list, Dustin Wolf would be an option for them. Like, can we get him Canadian citizenship? The guy's top 10 in adjusted numbers in the league right now. We don't have the high quality depth right now that they do, but like Adin Hill's legit, right? Like Adin Hill's a legit goalie and he's gotten on a roll. When he won the Stanley Cup that year, his numbers were, you translate them over a course of a season, you win the Vezina Trophy. Like his adjusted numbers were really good. Yes, they were a good team, but he played remarkably well behind him. He's perfectly capable. Jordan Binnington's having a bit of a down season at a bad time, but over the previous 5 years, he's been top 10 in the National Hockey League in adjusted save percentage, right? So Canada has the horses. They don't have the guys at the top of the league outside of Binnington over the last 5 years. They don't have the Vezina guys, but they're absolutely capable, especially if the structure in front of them fits their game and their strengths. If this turns into fire wagon, end-to-end, wide open, pond hockey, I don't know that we have we don't have the Russian. They're not in this tournament, but like we don't have the athletes that they have. But I would suggest if it turns into that kind of hockey, it might not be Hellebuck in net either, because I don't know if you're playing to his strengths. If it turns into you need an acrobat or a guy out there stopping bullets in his teeth, that might favor Jacob Markstrom. So these things, I always say goaltending never exists in a vacuum. Canada has a ton of depth. If we wanted to get into the conversation why they don't have more elite depth, we'd probably need a whole nother segment, and I have a whole ton of thoughts I spent last week doing the USA Hockey Bronze Goalie Coach Certification Program, and it's a grassroots program designed. They've got almost 4,000 bronze certified goalie coaches in the United States that ensures every goalie, whether it's 14, 15, down to 8, 7 years old, has a goalie coach on every team with a base understanding. And here's the key: not to get overly technical at young ages, to make sure that the teaching is age appropriate, to make sure that the kids are having fun, that they have somebody in their corner watching for them. So they're not spending half their practice down at the other ice, not doing anything, and the other half getting bombarded by so many shots, they have no chance to reset their technique or what they're supposed to be doing out there. And that approach compared to what we have here, which is gatekeeping our lower level certification programs, is to me at the root of the biggest difference we see. Again, we could spend a whole segment. I don't think we've run a POE camp for goaltenders in person. We used to have that on an annual basis. Top goalies, top junior goalies, top under 17 goalies came into Calgary every year and were exposed to top goalie coaching, sharing of ideas. Hey, what about this? Have you tried that? Like, haven't even run that for 3 or 4 years, a program of excellence in Canada. Our certification program, we don't have anybody full-time in charge of the position in this country. In Sweden, in Finland, in the USA, they do. There's a lot of things we need to do to catch up. But at the end of the day, despite all that, there's still a lot of great Canadian goaltenders out there.
Well, certainly I'm looking forward to the Four Nations, and I hope that the guys we normally cheer against can step up and help us against the best in the world. Kevin, always great catching up. We'll have to do this again, maybe in and around the tournament if you've got some time, and talk about the goalies that'll be in the Four Nations, and of course, Jets and Canucks again coming up in March. You have a great one. Thanks again. Always great to have you on the program.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to come back on. Nothing but time around Four Nations because I'm not covering it in person. So, yeah, hit me up and I'll be on.
Sounds good, Kevin. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, good stuff with Kevin Woodley. Appreciate him jumping on. You can check him out, NHL.com, InGoal Magazine. And Ken Wiebe coming up in just a couple minutes. Of course, our next 316 night is coming up on Thursday. Looking forward to seeing you all there. If you're coming to the game, make sure to just pop by and say hi. We'll be in the hangar bar outside of Section 316 before the game. And at intermissions. And Saturday night is going to be a fun night. The country night with a Jets cowboy hat giveaway for the first 7,500 fans. Remo, I have to give the Jets social media team or marketing team, whoever it is, a hat tip. Often when you're on YouTube and you fire up Winnipeg Sports Talk, we've been getting the ad for the Jets country night. And yeah, here it is. Dylan DeMello, you're play it with the sound, actually. I didn't usually have it.
Yeehaw! It's country night, y'all.
Not bad. Not bad. So anyways, get on out there. Saturday night against the Flames should be a fun one. And then the team on the road for a couple, and then back the following Friday. We get a chance to see Utah HC. Teams playing, actually Jets and Utah playing a couple games that week, starting off on Monday over in Utah and Salt Lake City. Hey, Ken's coming up in a minute. I do want to thank our friends at Princess Auto. And of course, we do all our bomber reports for Princess Auto as the home of the Bombers, Princess Auto Stadium. Some big Bomber news today. Evan Holm back with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That is great news for the Bomber defense. What a season he had last year. So great to see Evan Holm coming back. And yes, we will have to wait a little bit before getting back to Princess Auto Stadium. Certainly hoping for a schedule in the next week or so for the upcoming CFL season. But in the meantime, Princess Auto, of course, is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, Brandon location, or shop online 24/7, 365 over at princessauto.com. Big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, and of course the official spirit of your Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Pop by your local Manitoba liquor marts for Canada's oldest favorite Canadian whiskey, the original Canadian Club. You can also check out the Canadian Club Classic, 100% rye as well. at your local Manitoba liquor marts. And next time you're popping in for a rack at your local beer store, make sure to keep your eyes out for Canadian Club and Ginger Ale pre-mixed cocktail in cans, ready to go for you at your local beer store as well. As you listen, it is nice outside. I'm not sure how much work will be happening in the next few days with it being as cold as it is. However, you might be looking at getting some work done on your home or your property as we get into the next few months, and of course, spring and summer. And hey, if you're talking fencing or overhead doors, Wallace & Wallace is the place to go. They've been the leaders in fencing and overhead doors since 1946, serving both residential and commercial customers. If you need the security and protection of a new fence, they have you covered with vinyl, ornamental, chain link, welded wire, wood fences. And if you need a new garage door, they have the largest selection of overhead garage doors, one perfect to both match your home and add value to it as well. Give them a call, Wallace & Wallace, 452-2700. They'll be happy to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them online, wallacefences.com, wallacedoors.com, or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston. All right, it's Kenny time. Everyone's favorite part of the week. Ken Wiebe of the Winnipeg Free Press jumping on WST to chop it up. Junior, how are you?
Andrew, great to be with you. Beautiful day in the neighborhood. Yes, outside of a beatdown on Monday for the folks in purple, all is well here.
Shout out to you for talking into your mic as well. Just pure K&R hilarity last night for the first 3 minutes. And then
oh, man.
Rennie's look when he realized that the mic was nowhere near him for this little bit and then pulled it over. I mean, so funny. But a pretty spirited show last night. I mean, a lot to get to coming out of last night's 6-1 game. I know you reported on it all in the Free Press. I mean, this is another great start for the Winnipeg Jets, a really strong first period. And when that connection of Velarde and Scheifele and Connors cooking the way it was last night, you can put a team out of its misery quite early, and that's exactly what happened to Vancouver.
Yeah, you got that right, Huss. Just an incredible showing by that line in the first period. I mean, I don't know about you, but my mentions have certainly not had a lot of when is that line going to start producing, Huss? I mean, the receipts from the first 9 games or whatever it was, 7 or 8 or 9. I have not had any replies from several individuals who thought that would not work, could not work, and never would ever work, and should never be tried again.
Connor and Scheifele are tied for 3rd in goals in the NHL, the entire league.
Yeah, I mean, again, sometimes I get it. And this is not about blind faith in people or anything else, but when we did a little bit of digging under the surface, Huss, to realize that line only played together 17 times last year, and very few of those times they were all healthy at the same time, considering Gabe Velarde was hurt in Game 3 of the season. It was a not so subtle reminder to borrow a Blake Wheelerism, to pump the brakes and to maybe just let some things breathe a little bit. Is it always perfect? Absolutely not. But I'm sorry. If you are expecting better production than 26, 26, and 19 from your top line players, I would think that it's time to reassess. Now, I understand some of that damage and it is done on the top-ranked power play in the NHL, but it's been very clear the 5-on-5 play has been improved. And for folks who just point at, shots for, shots against, these are not Kyle Connor's a high-volume shooter, but neither Scheifele or Velarde are high-volume guys who need 6 quality looks on the grade A variety in order to score. So they're not firing pucks from all angles like the Carolina Hurricanes do, but I would say that the body of work through 45 games has been fairly consistent for that line. And, they will be, this is the reason Scott Arniel wanted to give them a little extra runway. And Huss, I reference this because the guy who originally put them together was Rick Bowness. And when I saw Rick in Florida in November, this is what they were looking to do and try to get out of that line. And when you look at the skill set, Gabe is not an explosive player like Kyle and Mark are, but he has this incredible ability to get to the tough areas. He wins board battles. He's an incredible tipper of pucks. His hands in tight are obscene, and he's got great vision, which, was on display on the Kyle Connor breakaway, which is probably one of the prettiest goals or dekes you will see this year, where he literally dekes Lankinen out of his pants, essentially. And then he kind of, makes sure to raise the degree of difficulty, puts it essentially like underneath where his stick is lying, right? I mean, he had the whole net to shoot at, but he's like, you know what? I've kind of deked him out of his jock strap. I'm just going to, cheekily put it here, like it's anyways. And again, this is not to try to reinforce a belief, but when I went on your show, Huss, and said, hey folks, I get it. 9-2 goals against versus goals for is not good. Some of that was bad luck for them. And as all three of them have told me in separate conversations, their defending needed to get better, and it has gotten better. Their puck management has gotten better, and their finishing ability has never been in question. And Huss, it maybe has never been better in terms of being on display the way that it has. So that top line was exceptional. They set the tone in that game. And man, I mean, Kyle Connor, honestly, Huss, and I don't mean this as a negative towards Kyle Connor, he could have had 5 or 6 in the game comfortably.
No problem. That
deflection. The redirect missed by inches, and he had 2 looks that were either just wide or just stopped by Kevin Lankinen. And I'm talking grade A looks, not just a, casual from the periphery. With a perfect shot, it might go in. Man, it just was an impressive display. And, just to go to the numbers here, 8 shot attempts in the game for Kyle Connor. Loved his game. Velarde is again, Huss, when I went on with you in the preseason and said Velarde could score 35 to 40, and if he stayed healthy and played 75 to 80, 80 plus games, this is why. I mean, again, it wasn't a lead pipe lock, but this is the type of ability that he has. He's playing in a role that he hasn't really had an opportunity to do so before since junior hockey in the Ontario Hockey League. And he's flourishing in this opportunity. And, the back and forth with Scheifele and Connor, who's leading the team in goals, who's, back, one's one ahead, one's tied. All of a sudden they're, again, to think that those two have 52 goals together through 45 games, this is elite level, high end production. And, it's not just us noticing in, our tiny little hamlet here. The NHL has noticed that this has been one of the most productive lines in the National Hockey League, and they're being treated as such by their opponents.
Yeah, not by Hockey Canada, unfortunately. Isn't it funny that since they announced the team, Mark Scheifele, 13 goals, and there's a list of guys that were overlooked that have all taken huge steps
Hyman
forward.
too,
Zach
right?
Hyman's in there, Marchessault. So, but listen, it is just fun to watch. And last night was a perfect example of that. We could talk about Kyle Connor and Scheifele and certainly what Velarde's meant and the all-world power play that is still number 1 in the league by 4 percentage points over the number 2. Just to put into perspective, there's the Jets and a big gap, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think it's a more interesting part of the conversation to talk about what's happening beyond the top line. Cole Perfetti got on the board last night. We'll get to him in a minute, but second game with Ehlers playing with Lowry and Iafallo. I mean, just your thoughts on what we've seen through 2 games, and do you think this is something that Coach Arneal's going to stick with for a while moving forward, even if some guys get healthy?
Yeah, I mean, I've liked what I've seen. Obviously, it was dominant performance against the Avalanche, Huss, where Ehlers has the 2 goals and also, embraces the shutdown role itself. I mean, that line I thought was very good when it had to be early in the game yesterday when they were, mostly playing against Paterson. I thought one of the things I was curious to see if they'd be going against Miller or Paterson. They really minimized the offensive production for the Paterson line. Paterson 1 shot, 1 attempt, not really much cooking for him. Brock Besser, barely noticed him, to be honest, at times out there, Huss. So I thought that line did very well in that game. And again, then once the blowout nature was happening, Scott Arneal kind of geared down on the ice time. Lowry 15 minutes, Ehlers had 14:44, whereas the game prior, was one of the highest, ice times of the year, I think, for Ehlers. So I've liked that line. You've talked about it. The dogged nature of Alex Iafallo has been really on display here as he's back, back in the top 6 like he was last year when he was filling in for Gabe Vilardi when he was hurt. I really like the way that he's played. That line was very good. They were kind of erased the Paterson line, quite frankly, and then they, in the third period, again, they just didn't have as much ice time because of the way the game had been flowing. But I've liked a lot of what I've seen from them. Again, it's twofold, right? So to me, I would describe it this way, Huss. Right now, Scott Arniel is using Adam Lowry in the same regard as Rod Brindamore uses Jordan Staal, where you have the human eraser down the middle and you're playing him with a skilled player. And then you have a really good forechecker in Iafallo, who's a great two-way presence that, has been a, double-digit goal scorer consistently, as many as 17, I think. So do I think that that's their ultimate second line after the deadline? I'm not certain, but I think Alex Iafallo has shown that if you need him to play in that middle 6 role, he can do it more than capably. In terms of Lowry, again, it opens up 2 opportunities, like you talked about with Jeff Hamilton and with Mike. Adam Lowry is the Jets' second line center in terms of responsibility. So are you going to use him on more of a distinct checking line that can score when you have Niederreiter there, a consistent 20-goal guy in Appleton? Or are you going to have him with, Nikolai Ehlers and maybe another forward that is brought in? Now, that's where I have a little bit of – that piques my curiosity. It also opens up some different options and avenues in terms of maybe you're looking at a third-line center on the trade market rather than a 2C, which may not cost as much. And again, I'm not saying the Jets won't go out and get a second-line center like they did with Sean Monahan. I'm just saying that this allows them to kind of broaden the scope of the type of player they're looking at. That it may not just be a Brock Nelson type of guy. You may look at, somebody that may be on the checking line with Niederreiter and Perfetti, or Niederreiter and Appleton, or Niederreiter and Iafallo, depending on what you're looking at. So I've also liked the job that Kupari has done in the 3C job. And again, 3C, I don't think is where Erasmus Kupari ends the season, but he's showing that with his speed that he can get the job done, and he's been a capable player. Huss, I've felt this way about Niederreiter for a long time and have shared it with you and on our own show. I wanted to see what he looked like with Cole Perfetti. I think that because of his ability to finish checks and get to the blue paint, it will encourage Perfetti to get closer to the net and be not just a perimeter player. And I'm not saying that's what he has been. It just, when you're struggling, sometimes your tendency is to stay away from the net and maybe pick up something in the high slot. Whereas I love the way that Perfetti went to the net on Saturday in the game, didn't get a reward, but his reward came in the form of 2 assists against the Canucks. So I know one of the topics of conversation this week has been how the dynamic changes for Ehlers. Huss, I'm not disputing your theory, but for a guy like Ehlers, he wants to get, the way you get paid is by producing. And I'm not saying he can't produce with Adam Lowry, but, going from maybe being on a top line role somewhere else compared to being on a checking line role, even though that role is valued, I don't know that equates to, enhancing his chances. The problem is he's going to be signing that contract before he, wherever he is, if he's on that top line, the deal will already be done. He's not signing a 1-year prove-it deal or anything. But what I'm saying is he will be going to a place where he believes he will be playing on the top line. And Huss, to your point about greener pastures, the only way to do that may be, to sign with the San Jose Sharks or a team that or Chicago. Well, it would be the appeal of playing beside Connor Bedard. But, you're also giving up the, big part of the culture that you helped build. If you're going to a, quote unquote bad team where your opportunities will be greater. So I'm not disputing that Nikolai Ehlers is still a candidate to return to the Jets. I do think that is something that he will definitely consider after a decade here. But I think that the dynamic doesn't change to me as much, even though I think he embraces the role. And I'm with you. I loved how enthusiastic he was about it. But the issue with Ehlers has not been, responsibility necessarily, even though he hasn't had the top line minutes. And Huss, quite frankly, the path to top line minutes is still not here based on how the top line has been playing. Now the Jets also have to sign deals for Connor and Vilardi, which also complicates matters for a guy that's looking for a raise, as you pointed out. Now, whether that raise is north of 7 or north of 8, that we don't know yet. But Vilardi's going to be getting paid, and Kyle Connor's also going to be getting paid. And even though the cap is going up considerably, all three of those guys will be looking at a pretty big ticket. So I think it's very interesting. I mean,
I guess just my theory on it is that, he was sort of, listen, that line, and you can call it the second line if you want, call it whatever. Listen, we can retag them. Playing with Vlad and with Cole, I think was a little frustrating for him a little while. They'd gone cold. They certainly weren't the go-to guys. And I guess my theory is just if things go well playing with Adam Lowry, and all of a sudden Nikolai Ehlers is playing more and playing more impactful matchups, helping the team win, adding some more offense to that line, and the team continues to have success, I guess I would argue that I think he probably would feel more a part of the success in addition to being part of this world-class power play. And it might make it more likely to be open to stick around. I have no idea what he's thinking. I mean, he might just be all about the money. I mean, it might just be, hey, I want the biggest check, and I don't care if I'll be a top-line player on a terrible team. No problem. Some guys are like that. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, you have personal success, you're part of a team that does well, and I think you feel more a part of it than maybe he has in the past. Put it this way, I don't think it hurts the potential of maybe being more open to stick around if the money's right. And who knows whether that will be. Again, that's
for
a conversation.
Sure. No, and I'm with you, Hassan. I'm not disputing any of those factors. And I just think he already has felt more part of it by being on the top power play unit. And again, that Davis Payne went into Scott O'Neill's office and said, hey, Ehlers is a guy you got to get incorporated into the power play. I like Nikolai Ehlers here in this position, a position that, quite frankly, I don't think that he was considered for under the previous regimes in terms of where he fits on the power play. It was always he and Scheifele play the same spot and only one of them can be there. Unless Mark moves back to the high slot, it's not going to work.
Any theory on why that was?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but I think that's, coaches are smart guys. And, when Davis pointed it out that was something he thought of, for me, I'm like, man, I feel like an idiot for not thinking of it. I mean, for me, I thought, well, you could use him as a one-timer guy, but whoa, guess what? He's not going to have a better one-timer than Kyle Connor, so that doesn't work. I also kind of, having witnessed the Jets power play at its finest, Huss, you could have easily made the case that even if you kept running it through Scheifele's side on the half wall, that Ehlers could be the slot one-timer option the same way that Scheifele was the one-timer option for Blake Wheeler when he wasn't firing it across to Patrick Laine for the cross ice 1T. So, some people just have that. I mean, that there's a reason these guys are working in the NHL and they have great ideas, right? And there's a reason why I'm on the sidelines doing my best to analyze. So it was a very smart idea. And again, I'm not saying that nobody previously had the idea, but in terms of implementation, this is the first time we've seen it, and it's working incredibly well.
I just bring that up because, I mean, for all the great things that the Jets did last year, I mean, Bones said himself in a conversation with me on this show, if we had a league average power play, we'd probably win the President's Trophy last year.
For sure.
It just seems sort of crazy that they never really tried that at all.
Yeah, no, for sure, Hassan. And it's a great question. And there you go. I mean, maybe it's something I should have asked Davis Payne today when he spoke to the media after practice. But
he must be pretty happy these days.
I would say that he's a happy guy. But I mean, like all coaches, you're like, yeah, 45 games, this is great. But you're always worrying about the next bit of tension, I guess, if you're a coach. But what did he say? Today's classic line was, they want to be a recession-free power play, which was a great line and one that will be used in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press and online at winnipegfreepress.com. His point being that they have to be able to carry over momentum. It doesn't mean you're always going to score 2 a game or whatever it is. I mean, they went through crazy hot streaks and they went through one down spell, but the ability to generate momentum, even if when you're not scoring, was his point. And again, yesterday was another classic example. Josh Morrissey doesn't get an assist on the Scheifele power play marker, but 4 of the 5 guys touched it in like a 11-second span, Huss. And I mean, that was something that we didn't see enough of in the prior days. And it's one of the reasons why Davis Payne deserves his flowers and credit for his ability to keep that, not just get that unit ready, but to sustain it at a 30+% rate through 45 games is exceptional. But now the test is to stay around that rate as they continue into the second half, where things that we've seen at Huss, they've been having trouble drawing penalties of late, and that's something that when you're moving your feet and making it hard on your opponent, that's something that you got to do in order to when you have a weapon like that power play the Jets have, you need to always be constantly, even if the other team's being disciplined, force them into taking penalties so that the power play can continue to be a weapon for them.
Hey, let me put this to the chat, and then I'll put it to you. Why not question of the day for Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray? We're going to get into Cole Perfetti, who hit a milestone last night. But for the chat, where, in your opinion, where is the best place for Cole Perfetti in the lineup come playoff time? Let's kind of fast forward to April, assume that Cole is playing. Where do you find the best fit for Cole? I know, and you spoke on this yesterday on KNR. We heard from Cole afterwards. Points had been few and far in between.
For sure.
He gets a couple last night. How big do you think that is for him? And just where is he at and in this new spot in the lineup, playing currently with Kupari and Nino?
Yeah, I mean, Huss, you can tell. I mean, Cole's a very serious guy. He himself knows that he probably needs to smile more and soak it in. But it's hard to be smiling more when you go 9 without a point, when you're a point producer, even though you feel like you're advancing in all of these other portions of your game. And I mean, it's the blessing and the curse, right? I mean, Cole is not a big guy, so he's not going to be a physical player. So he's talking about, putting your fingerprints all over other parts of the game. Well, he's not a burner like Ehlers or Kyle Connor. So, or like Kupari, he's not going to be making an impact with his speed, and he's not an overly physical guy, even though he wins one-on-one battles and confrontations, as Scott O'Neill pointed out when I asked him about it yesterday. But he can impact the game with so many other things, and winning stick battles and lifting your stick and getting leverage on your opponent, getting to the blue paint. So I think that Cole's overall and all-around game is really and truly improving. I'm not just saying that because someone is telling me that's the case. That's what I see. But the problem, Huss, is that you need to do all of those things and still be a complementary point producer. I've talked most of the year about Cole needing to be a primary point producer. I'm already kind of easing up on those expectations and thinking that right now where Cole is at, if he's a complementary point producer, that's probably going to be enough for this team. But it also means you have to be more productive than, I think, what is it now, 4 points in 5 of the last 21 games or something like that. So it's a fine line. And like some people are just quick to say he can never do it, he'll never do it again. Well, no, he's 23 years old. And he just is coming off a 19-goal season. Now, he'd have to get incredibly hot to match those totals. But if you score 19, it's not an accident, generally speaking, when you have the word processor, like I always say about Cole, and you have the skill set, the vision, the passing, and the finishing ability. So, again, where is he at right now? And can Cole be a third-line player if that's more of a checking line or checking plus line? I'm not sure, but Huss, the beauty of what's happening now with both Nemesnikov and Appleton out, and I'm not saying it's a benefit for them to be out of the Jets lineup because they're both been contributors of very good value this year. But through necessity, we're going to have the opportunity to find out over the next, whether it's 2 games or 10 games, we'll figure out what Cole Perfetti looks like beside Nino Niederreiter, at least for the time being. So for me, if Cole Perfetti can play well with Niederreiter, then he can handle the responsibility, because one of the underrated parts of Cole's game is that he's an underrated defensive player because he's so smart. He knows where to be and anticipate and all of those things, even though you don't think of him as a physical punisher or someone who defends with his body. I mean, he still does it through body position, but it's not through physical force. So perfect for the playoffs. I'm not comfortable saying right now, saying it has to be the second line or bust. I don't think that's the case. But we need more evidence to see what it's going to look like with Nino Niederreiter, Huss. And then we'll have to find out what kind of center the Jets bring in, and then whether it makes more sense if it's Lowry there or if you got to shuffle Cole around somewhere else. Because, I mean, the other part of this too, Huss, we've talked about Morgan Barron and how his game is rounding into form, where you might try him on a different line, or maybe Iafallo is suddenly in this other portion. And again, I've said this before, I still, in this stretch of time, I'd like to see even though IFL is doing a great job with Lowry, I still think that the Ehlers-Niederreiter duo on the wings could work with Lowry or with Nemesnikov or with Kupari or whatever happens to be brought in here before March 7th. So the beauty of where things are at and how the Jets have positioned themselves, even though, and I understand that everyone wants to win every single game and fans think that the Jets should be 82-0. The Jets have afforded themselves the opportunity to have a little trial and error here, with their lines, even though Scott Arniel has been very adamant that he doesn't like just change for the sake of change or disrupting things where it's using guys in pairs and having all kinds of different line blender activities going, except on nights where they're struggling to generate. So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, Cole's going to show us in the next, whatever it is, 15, 18 games before the deadline. 14 games before, where are we at before the four? Anyway, sorry, my math is off here. We'll find out something before Four Nations, Huss, and then it's a sprint to the deadline between the February 22nd and March 7th. So, and as you and I have talked about last week and weeks previous, now where does it fall for the Jets in terms of when you make your preemptive strike? Or are you going to have to wait until March 7th so you accrue more cap space so you can make a bigger splash, which again, I'm not saying that's what the Jets are doing, but if you're considering that, it impacts your ability to go for the preemptive strike if you're making multiple moves, which we expect them to be doing.
Hey, speaking of making moves, there was a move today.
Yeah.
Isaac Phillips comes over from the Chicago Blackhawks organization. I see Jacob Stoller has, he was a top 2 D pairing in his first 2 AHL seasons. He's got 56 games. Kuzman going the other way. I figure you have done a little digging. I mean, what do we know about the player, and what do you think was the impetus for this swap of a defenseman at the AHL level?
Yeah, for sure, Huss. I mean, I did work the phones here on that with several scouts, and what I've been able to ascertain about Phillips is that he is a guy who he brings some of the qualities the Jets don't have an abundance of with their depth defensemen. Now, I expect him to go to the Moose first, but this is a guy who can be, he projects his ceiling would be probably in the 6'7" range. He is a big physical guy, 6'3", 205, plays a bruising style, protects the front of the net. He can kill penalties, and again, a little bit of an imposing player at times, where Kuzman is a guy who, you like the skill and he's very mobile, but the Jets I didn't see a pathway to Kuzman becoming an NHL player, whereas Phillips already has 50 plus games on his resume. Now, again, it's up to him to show, he's more of a, when he keeps it simple, he can be effective type of player, maybe more of a bang it off the glass or, look for the, shorter passes in terms of transporting the puck outside of the zone. But he's the kind of guy that Jets, could be looking at as a penalty kill / physical type of guy on the third pairing, whether it's this year or next year type of thing. But again, for the time being, it's a depth guy. He would be right now, I'm guessing he would be between the 8 to 10 spot on the depth chart, given how Dylan Coughlin and some of those other guys have played. But I think it's a smart pickup. It's both guys probably need a change of scenery. And from the tweet from Scott Powers mentioning that, the Blackhawks second overall draft pick, they're both Belarusian, and maybe that Kuzman can help kind of the transition phase for him coming over, in the North American game and getting going in that organization here. But again, this wasn't the splashy deal, but it's one of those, prepare for the unexpected type of, if you're going on a playoff run and you have to call on your 8-9 guys, then you have a guy that has experience and maybe has some upside. And, from Mark Lazarus's tweet, super, smart guy, good to talk to. But again, this is a guy who's looking for, and also too, I think one of the other things from my discussions today, when he played for the Hawks, Huss, you're on a D pair where I think at least half of those guys were 23 and under, and he's 23 years old. So you're not getting a lot of insulation if you're Isaac Phillips playing on a, bad team that doesn't really defend or commit to defending overly well. If you go to a structured team, maybe your results maybe change in terms of your puck moving and those sorts of things. So that's sort of what we've been able to pick up on the scouting reports after talking to multiple people here today.
Well, good thing, and congratulations to us for making it through the entire segment without talking about other parts of the Jets' third pairing. I know you touched on it last night. I did at the beginning of the show. That conversation won't anytime soon. Although I do think with some of the noise around Stan just lately, but after last night, a couple games out of the lineup might be a good thing to kind of just cool the temperature down around it, and because it was strange, I will say that. I mean, it wasn't something that we've really heard before. On a night where everyone's in a good mood, you're lighting up the team to be on one of your players in a 6-1 win because a shutout's lost. It's I don't know, man. It's kind of
strange times
we've seen before. Yeah, exactly.
Well, John has seen it, right?
Well,
so he's seen it on many occasions, and lots of people want to get run out of town. And some of those people that have got run out of town, where he covers hockey primarily, have gone on to some pretty impressive things in other markets. And again, I'm not saying this is a plus B = C, but I mean the discourse over the third pairing, quite frankly, has been absolutely. I'm not even sure what word I want to use here, but it's a little more intense than it needs to be, quite frankly. But again, passion that pays the bills is fine, but like perspective here would probably be a fairly important thing to work through. And again, Hayden Fleury's on the verge. I mean, the no firm timetable, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's back by the weekend. I mean, if, his number's called, he could play against Calgary, I'm guessing. Colin Miller out of non-contact today. Still think it's going to be a bit longer for him, but suddenly the Jets will need to make a move with Dylan Coghlan, and for them to send him to the Moose before the 30 days and 10 games are up would be a smart move. And suddenly the Moose defense would have Isaac Phillips and Dylan Coghlan, and a team that's finally playing a little better that would help them. And if Elias Solomonson can get healthy, all of a sudden half of their defense score looks different as well. So anyways, the third pairing watch will still be on, and based on today, it looked like it will be Stanley, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. But Hanel Stanley was the third pairing today, barring Hayden Fleury returning earlier than maybe we were expecting. So we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Kenny, great stuff. You might have to put a helmet on for K&R tomorrow, but hey, just
head on a swivel all the time at all times.
Willing to do that dirty work. Have a great one.
To the hard areas.
Thanks for doing that.
My pleasure. Have a great day. And I know you talked about it yesterday. I'm sorry I missed you on Friday. I got there a little later after the show, but I thought everyone did a great job with the Ted Wyman Memorial. Super awesome to see some good friends that I don't see enough of. Great to see Kirk Penton made it out, and the Brandon Sun contingent was very strong. And I wish I had been able to be there for the speeches, but based on what I heard from the conversations that I had, great venue and a great evening of memories. Loved the projector, the things spinning through, and I mean, making light of a tough situation. And again, that this is why I'm talking. And I'm not telling fans how to act, but when, in real life, we're dealing with, people in our lives being lost way too soon, I just would ask at times maybe turn the temperature down just a smidge when we're dealing with things like third pairing and 6-7 defense pairing discourse. When a team that you follow with all of your heart is first in the Western Conference and things of that nature. So anyways, that is my public service announcement. Plus, I'm going to turn this off before the mud is being slung in my direction. But have a great day. And also too, awesome job on the Hockey Talks front, Huss, yesterday by the Jets and Canucks. As someone who covered Rick Rippon's first ever professional game and, got to know him through covering him over the years. I love what that program has been doing here, not only here, but across North America. Project 11 doing great, amazing things. And I loved seeing Rick's family members on the ice yesterday in all variations of the jerseys. And honestly, that Rick was never able to play an NHL game with the Jets is still a bit of a tragedy in itself. But I'm glad that the impact that he's having on the organization and beyond is still taking place at these times. And I love the line that Zinger read at the end when I is replaced with we, mental illness becomes mental wellness, and that's such an important thing in these days, in this day and age. So anyways, that is my soliloquy. I will cede the floor to John. Sorry for taking your time. Great to see you as always, even virtually. Huss, have a great day and weekend, and enjoy the tilts, my friend.
Right back at you. There's Ken Wiebe, Winnipeg Free Press. John giving him a nice little wave from the green room right now. Weber jumping on, and fun KNR last night. As I mentioned, Rennie hilariously was not using a mic for the first 3 minutes, and then realized it, and then cranked the headband out immediately. And then Kenny came in hot a little later on. It's always fun in the KNR chat after a big win like last night. Listen, before we get to John Matisz, I do want to get to fan feedback brought to you by the gang at Fans First, your number one spot for buying Winnipeg tickets on the resale market. No fees. When you go on to Fans First, what you see is what you pay, and it is quickly becoming the number one and most popular place for people with a pair with extra tickets to sell on the resale market with the best customer service around. All right, our feedback. I asked everyone, where do you think is the best fit for Cole Perfetti come playoff time? Ehlers We Trust, third or fourth line. The Knoll, press box. SK, traded or press box. No Frills Dino, Fetz on a scoring third line. Schickster, third line wing. So, like many of these topics, a differing number of opinions on this. One thing that I will say, if Cole Perfetti's going to be in that top 9 come playoff time, he'll have to continue to have, and I like the fight in his game so far this year. I think he's better on some board battles, on pucks. That's going to need to continue to get better. And as Ken mentioned, you also have to produce. And it was very nice to see Cole get to 100 for his career last night and get a couple on the board. Keep your fan feedback coming in the chat. Fan feedback brought to you by Fans First, by fans, for fans, no fees. Check out the site today at fansfirst.ca. All right, John Matisz coming up in just 1 minute. Let's give a quick cheers to our friends at Winnipeg's favorite local brewery, Little Brown Jug.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Big weekend coming up at your local Boston Pizza. 4 big NFL playoff games, a Saturday night Jets game. Of course, Jets in action tomorrow night as well against the Kraken. Whether it's the local hockey team or the big football game, no better place to go than your local Boston Pizza Lounge. With your crew, you can win great prizes during Jet games all year, as well as during NFL football. And, of course, you're guaranteed for a good time with those ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and more. For your next time you're heading out with the gang, make it your local Boston Pizza. Great Pasta Tuesday deals all January long as well for you pasta lovers. And, hey, you can always get it hot and fresh to your door by ordering at bostonpizza.com. And, hey, a big shout-out to Royal Sports as well. I'm going to have to hit down to Royal and make sure my Chiefs gear is ready to go for the game on the weekend. Of course, whatever your favorite NFL team is, you're covered at Royal Sports. And as far as the local NHL team goes, there is no better place to get your jersey personalized with your favorite player's name and number. Hoodies, hats, you name it, they've got it when it comes to Winnipeg Jets merchandise, not to mention Blue Bombers, the rest of the NHL, and all of your favorite professional teams. Biggest hockey section in town is the Hockey Superstore for over 40 years, and so many cool things on the King's skate, snow, and surf side. Pop on down, see it for yourself. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Winnipeg for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. All right, a very patient John Matisz joins us right now. Sorry, Kenny got on a little bit of a run there, as he is wont to do, John, but you got some good stuff, a little eye into what's happening here in Winnipeg with their last few minutes with Weber.
Yeah, no, Ken's fantastic. I mean, he's always been, honestly, like, and I'm not just saying this because he was just on, but like one of the nicest people you'll ever come across. 100%. We worked together mostly virtually with Sun Media over the years, and just like the politeness on this guy is outstanding. And yeah, it's not like he wasted your airtime with frivolous stuff. I mean, he was talking about some serious stuff there, so I thought it was appropriate. I was fine waiting. It's all good.
Did you happen to catch any of the Jets and Canucks last night here in Winnipeg?
Yeah, I did. It was one of those games where I'm like all geared up for it. Okay, especially because I knew I was coming on this show. I'm like, I should definitely watch this game. The Canucks are,
interesting.
Yes, continuing their roller coaster season. So yeah, I tapped into that and I watched probably 3/4 because by the end I'm like, I cover 32 teams, not just these two teams. Maybe I should check in elsewhere. It's such a blowout. But it as Kyle Connor does, maybe once every 2 months, he reminded me that he's one of those guys that for whatever reason slips under the radar nationally, internationally in terms of the attention he gets versus what he should probably get based on how productive he is. And some nights he just goes off. He looks like one of those superstar talents like a Kucherov or a McKinnon or whoever. And obviously he doesn't do it as consistently as those guys, hence why he is not labeled a superstar, but he has that gear in him. And we saw that last night. So that's what jumped off the page was Kyle Connor's speed, Kyle Connor's hockey IQ, Kyle Connor's shot, and just how he can really rev it up every once in a while.
Yeah, it was sort of magic. And if you tuned in and if you hadn't been watching a lot of the Jets so far this year and you're wondering, like, what the heck's going on with this team? The first period was a pretty good example of it. I mean, a real solid defense. I think the Canucks, with about 3 minutes left in the period, still only had 2 shots. It was already 3-0. And Kyle Connor had scored in a multitude of ways, including one of the filthiest dekes you'll see on poor Kevin Lankinen last night. But, part of the Jets' success has been, a nuclear power play, unlike anything we've seen here, really ever in Winnipeg. We were kind of comparing it to their power play back at the height of the Jets 2.0, 17-18, 18-19. And while they were good, they were 4th in the league. They were 5th in the league. I mean, the Jets' power play right now, John, is not only first, but there's a big gap between 1 and 2. 4 percentage points, which is very significant, especially because we're not talking about a 10-game sample. We're now into the second half of the year, and it's hard to nail down or quantify just how massive that's been for Winnipeg. But I'll point to the power play in addition to the brilliance of Connor Hellebuck as the reason we're talking about the Jets sniffing around for a top spot in the West.
Oh, absolutely, and especially when you consider the penalty kill's been subpar and a bit of a concern, and you and Ken were talking about the defensive depth. That's obviously something people are circling. Second line center has still not been filled, to the degree that it should be. So yeah, I mean the power play. One guy I love to watch on that power play is Velarde, and he gets forgotten a little bit based on the amount of talent with Scheifele and Connor and Morrissey and whoever else. But there's something about Velarde where I swear I'm not just saying this because I'm on a Winnipeg podcast, but he's honestly maybe top 10 on my list of watchability in the NHL. There's I love he's got that really long stick and he's got those fantastic hands in tight, and he really works the crease area, the slot area from both a playmaking and shooting perspective on the power play and 5-on-5, but it really shines on the power play. And there's something about him, the big body, the fact that he's not a great skater, but gets around perfectly fine and uses his hockey smarts to turn that perceived disadvantage into an advantage. And then you look at the backstory where it's not only was this a massive win of a trade for the Jets, but on a personal level with Velarde, he went through those horrible injuries to start his NHL career, and now he's thriving. There's something about every time I turn on the Jets, I'm like, I want to see what Velarde's up to. Oh, there he is doing some sort of dangle around the net front. Oh, there he goes trying to do a wraparound. There's just always something happening that I love about Velarde's game.
He's been magic with those guys, especially at 5-on-4, and adds a dimension and brings something to that power play that, as talented as Ehlers and Connor and Scheifele are, that they don't really have, that low down net front presence and it seems like right now he's got eyes in the back of his head. I mean, I don't know if you caught that goal that the Jets scored against the Kings on Friday night, but I mean, that's probably a top 10 pass in the league this year. I mean, it was sort of Globetrotter stuff, and it's really fun to watch. And, while we talk about the power play, and you're kind of mentioning Vilardi sort of getting forgotten maybe sometimes when talking about the top stars on the Jets, it's pretty amazing. I mean, you roll up the NHL stats leaders right now, and Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele are tied together at third overall in the National Hockey League for goals. You got Draisaitl with 37. You got Reinhart with 31 for Dry, 27 for Reinhart. And then both Scheifele and Connor are at 26. And I think that's totally been overshadowed and sort of happening quietly because people are waking up to the unmatched brilliance of Connor Hellebuyck in the Jet net right now, who's not only garnering Vezina consideration, quite obviously, but also justifiably, people are now starting to say, well, wait a second, I think we might have to be talking about the Hart Trophy for Connor Hellebuyck.
Yeah, there's too many good stories coming out of Winnipeg, I think is what you're saying.
It's fun to talk about every day on Winnipeg Sports Talk, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. And on the MVP case, I think that like the way I'm looking at it right now at around the midway point, and I fortunately get a vote on this, the way that I'm looking at it is that I think that Quinn Hughes is my slight favorite, or whatever you want to call it, my slight number one contender right now for the Hart. And the reason why is that his on-off splits are just outrageous. Like I haven't looked them up in the last couple of days, but going back a few days, it was like 55% of the attempts, 55% of the scoring chances, and 64% of the goals at 5-on-5 when Hughes is on the ice. And then when he's off the ice, the Canucks become a lottery team. They're 44% attempts, 44% scoring chances, and somewhere in the 40s for goals too. So that massive gap mixed with the fact that Hughes from the back end is leading the team in scoring by 17 points, and the next guy is Connor Garland. Like, it's pretty wild. And you also mix in the fact that it's been a turbulent year off the ice with obviously the well-publicized rift or whatever it is between Paterson and Miller. I kind of start siding towards Quinn Hughes, and then Draisaitl, Hellebuyck, and McKinnon are in that really tight behind Hughes tier of Draisaitl leading in goals while playing with, decent line mates, but not star line mates in Arvidsson and Podkolzin. He's got terrific defensive numbers. Hellebuyck, I'm singing to the choir here, but runaway Vezina winner, extreme workload brings him into the Vezina conversation. Whereas if you're a tandem guy, it's kind of like, okay, are you out there enough to be considered an MVP of the league? And then McKinnon leads the league in points, just nightly dominance. And the Avs have had a ton of forward injuries, so he's really carried the offense there. But that's where my head's at. I don't know about you, Hustler. Where are you at?
Listen, I will admit to being somewhat biased on this, but let me make the case for Connor Hellebuyck as the leader right now. Hellebuyck right now, when you pull up the goaltending leaders in the National Hockey League, has a significant lead in goals against average at 2.00, flirting with a sub 2 goals against average. He is the number one goaltender in save percentage at a .929. He's 5 wins clear of the next guy in the National Hockey League. He is leading the league in shutouts right now, and he's doing all that playing the most minutes of any goaltender in the league as well. And if you're leading in every single statistical category at the most important position and playing more of it than anybody else, I almost would say by definition that player should almost be the leader. And I guess, listen, I know it's interesting with the way people vote on this. There is an award for goalies for the Vezina Trophy. But as long as goaltenders are eligible for the Hart Trophy, with the line that I just mentioned, and oh, by the way, also backstopping a team that is in first place in the West, I think there's a very compelling argument that this is the year to pay attention to the goaltender in the mix right now and maybe give him the nod.
Yeah, he 100% is headed towards a finalist nod at worst. And let me just add to your your sort of rundown of the different stats. Sportlogic does a really good job of doing goals saved above average statistic, a metric, and spitting that out. And they it's better than evolving hockey and natural stat trick and all that, because it encompasses a little more nuance in terms of the quality of the shots and everything. So, obviously Hellebuyck leads the league in goals saved above expected, like total. But if you even cut it down to by 60 minutes, so basically by game, which tends to help guys who haven't played a ton, he's still like right up there in the top 5. So you've got Stolarz is the first guy, Mackenzie Blackwood, Askarov, that's only played 8 games, so he barely even counts. Logan Thompson, and then Hellebuyck. Like, he's right in the mix there. And those other guys, Stolarz, 17 games played. Blackwood, 11 for Colorado. He's played elsewhere. I don't have his numbers for San Jose. Askarov, 8 games. That's nothing. Thompson, 23. Again, like, this is not nearly as much as Hellebuyck. And another thing is that the Jets have a really good defensive system, so it's actually very hard for a goalie to outplay his environment. And so Hellebuyck is kind of bucking a trend where it's like, usually if you're behind a really strong defensive system, you don't rank very highly in goals saved above expected, at least when you rate it out per 60 minutes. But Hellebuyck's managed to do it. Like, it's the conditions are good, which makes it difficult for him to look good in that stat, yet he's in the top 5. And if you start looking at how many games the other guys have played, he's easily the most impressive among that top 5.
It certainly is. I mean, listen, he has been brilliant, and continue. It'll be interesting to see how much he plays down the stretch, because he's in such a groove, and the Jets are now in a position where they've kind of gotten through just about all of their back-to-backs of the season. Like, the toughest part of the Winnipeg schedule was through November and early December. They now are, I think there's just one back-to-back the rest of the year. But the one thing with Winnipeg that I think that they'll want to do is make sure that they maybe can give themselves a little bit more of a cushion and feel very confident that they don't have to really grind through March and April with Hellebuyck, and give him the rest that he wants and needs, and have him as fresh as possible to be the best version of himself coming up when we get to the postseason. John, just switching over to the East. I was on the Lock Shop today with Dustin Nielsen. It was sort of a slow day in the league, so we were talking about a few of the big stories and the teams, and we got looking at the playoff race in the East. Now, we focus a lot in on the West, and Calgary's holding it down, and Vancouver's there, and I guess St. Louis. I mean, it's not. You look at the East right now, and with the Bruins kind of fading back to the pack, the Columbus Blue Jackets going on a heater. They've won 5 in a row, and they're 8-2 in their last 10. There is 3 points separating Boston, Columbus, Ottawa, and Montreal right now. And Ottawa and Montreal, I think, might actually have even better points percentages right now, because they have games in hand. Now, the Wings had been on a 7-game heater. They shockingly lost to San Jose at home last night. But how long is that list of teams that you think are legitimately in it in the East when it comes to the playoff race? Because you can make an argument that goes pretty far down, and it could make for maybe a couple poor first-round series for the division winners, but I think a really fun race to Game 82 over for those 2 wildcard spots.
Yeah, the East is really top-heavy. I find the West, like 1 through 8, like, even though Calgary's not like a contender in any way, at least they're like a competitive team every night. There's a respectability there. I find when you go to the East and you look at the wild card, I mean, as you mentioned, the Bruins kind of spiraling out of control. They look like they're on the outs in terms of securing a wild card spot. Like, sure, they could eventually get one, but they're not in a secure spot right now. And Columbus is a great story. Ottawa's right there. Montreal, Detroit, I suppose you could include Philly, but not really. But what all those teams have in common, as much as there's some good stories in there, is that they're very middling. They're very unexciting from a beat the first round opponent perspective. The one team that jumps off the page to me, to be honest, is Ottawa. I just think that Travis Green has been such a fantastic fit there in terms of them getting themselves in, I guess, more of a playoff happy defensive structure, something that will not only get you to the playoffs because you're winning more games in the regular season, you're a more respectable team, but also doing something maybe in the playoffs. They're the closest to that I see. And also, it really sucks that Linus Ullmark is out for them right now because I feel like they had fixed their goaltending woes. He's been really good when he's been healthy, and that's been an issue.
Well, they just found this Marilainen that just keeps on throwing up donuts as well. I mean, credit to them for having the depth and finding guys that are doing it. But it's amazing that they're going down to AHL guys that have been coming up and doing the job for them.
Yeah, and that's a reflection of the defensive structure. It's a reflection of, the Tkachuk, Stützle, Shabbat core that we've been waiting on, kind of maturing, kind of coming together as far as, everyone being a little more responsible, everyone being a little more, not chasing points as much as they may have done in the past.
Buy into team success and realizing what needs to be done to actually have that.
Yeah, I look at Columbus, for example, and I go, this is a hot run. I don't know if it's going to last. I look at Montreal, I go, they might be a little ahead of schedule in terms of, are they going to fall back in the second half? Detroit, I feel like they're kind of riding the new coach vibes right now. I just have such a problem with the roster makeup there. So Ottawa's the one team, honestly, out of that mix, out of that group of middling teams that I have some faith in, that I think has, more of an upward trajectory here towards the second half.
You know what's funny to note when you look at it? Ottawa, of those teams, including Boston and Columbus in the wild card, and everybody outside looking in, Ottawa is the only team with a positive goal differential. Huh. Ottawa has a +4. Columbus is a -1. The Bruins are -22. I mean, the Bruins number is actually second worst in the East. Like, Buffalo's got a better goal differential. The Islanders, the Rangers. So they've obviously had some really rough nights, including getting pumped 8-1 here in the Peg a few weeks ago, which was a very fun night. You know what's kind of funny about this? When you look at goal differential, I mean, the teams in the Met, Washington +46, Jersey 27, Carolina 24, Tampa's +34. They're in third place. Now, again, they've got some games to make up, but the Leafs are only +8 and the Panthers are only +11 right now. So finding ways to win right now, but that's a pretty good indicator of where teams are. And right now, when you look at the West, also somewhat top heavy, Colorado in the first wild card, and then LA, Edmonton, Vegas, Dallas, Minnesota, and the Jets, all in the plus. And the Jets right now actually with the league best +53 goal differential. And then a very different story when you get down below. Yeah, listen, we're going to start paying a lot more attention to these early 6 p.m. games because it could be a lot of fun just for fans that have no skin in the game to see how things shake out in the East as we get forward. How are you feeling about Canada's chances at the Four Nations before we go as we get closer? It seems like all the guys they didn't pick for the team are the guys that are absolutely on fire right now, led by Mark Scheifele here in Winnipeg.
I know. I was actually looking it up before I came on. So Scheifele's 8th in points per game since December 4th when they named the team in the entire league. And if you look at just Canada, he's only behind McKinnon, McDavid, and Point. And all those guys were named last summer. So any guy on that big announcement on December 4th, he's technically playing better than it for just going straight on points per game. So that's a statement. And I mean, Logan Thompson, talk about a statement.
Whoa.
He was honestly, like, in terms of snubs, like it's one thing to have like snubs in hindsight, but I feel like a real snub on the day of the announcements, the two at least that stuck out to me were Tage Thompson for the U.S. and Logan Thompson for Canada, not brothers. Tage has battled an injury. He looks fine, but he hasn't been dominant. Like, it's ultimately not the end of the world for the U.S., but for Canada, leaving Logan Thompson off at this point, I mean, he's right in there in terms of like down ballot Vezina vote, maybe even like third, somewhere in there. He was doing really well at the start of the season. This isn't in hindsight. He's continued to ride that wave, and with Charlie Lindgren out right now for the Capitals, he's getting more playing time as well. So in terms of Canada's prospects for the tournament, I mean, I think it goes in terms of like my favorites: U.S., the top to bottom, they're the best team. But then Canada, I would put second, and they have the most firepower, the most sort of like quote unquote generational players or superstar players, but questions in goal. And then you go to Sweden, and I think Sweden, it all kind of depends on the blue line. I think they have really strong blue liners. And if they have the right mix there and it's kind of guns a-blazing, I think that they can win this tournament. But if it's a weird mix on the blue line, I feel like they can go really south. And Finland's going to be plucky. They're going to be the underdog out of the four. I mean, there's only 4 teams, so it's kind of tough. At some point, you got to pick an underdog. So I think they're right in there. I don't think anything's really changed since the roster announcement. Like, there hasn't been a big injury, like Allmark for Sweden, but, you know, Markstrom was probably starting anyway, and he might even return. Kreider for the U.S. has gotten injured. Probably a blessing in disguise. They can add a Cole Caulfield or Jason Robertson or a Clayton Keller, or hey, maybe Tage Thompson. But Canada, they've gotten lucky with no major injuries, so we'll see how this goes.
Well, hey, Braden Point got benched by John Cooper
yes.
for missing a team meeting. Better not do that for Team Canada if he wants to be in. Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I was very surprised that Montembeault got the call, though now they're winning a bunch of games. But Logan Thompson, I think he's 19-2-3 right now for the number 1 team in the East, and certainly probably deserved to be it. I mean, I think he's a guy with the way he's playing, you'd feel a lot more confident going to if things don't go well with Aiden Hill or Binnington. Although, let's face it, if we're at the point where the 3rd-string goalie for Canada is playing, we're probably screwed in the first place. So hopefully the 1 and 2 guys can get the job done.
Yeah, it's such a short tournament that like the chances of using your 3rd stringer is pretty slim. And like I didn't mind the idea of like choosing Aiden Hill and Jordan Binnington as sort of, okay, they won a cup, like they've been in these high pressure situations, they're playing fairly well. When you've got so many mediocre selections, okay, side with those 2 guys. But the 3rd one, it's almost like they went with Montembeault as sort of like a project for the Olympics. Like, okay, if we think that he's going to be in the running next year, why don't we take him and he can be around the team and sort of take it all in? Because it didn't really make sense to pick him over Thompson or even, you know, a couple other guys. Like, it wasn't a bad pick. It wasn't like totally off the board, but it seemed like you weren't picking the guy who was hot, and you're already kind of picking Hill and Binnington for, you know, nostalgic or sort of like, you know, track record reasons. So yeah, at the time it was a little suspect, and I think it's proven to be even more suspect.
What do you and the score team have cooking for viewers coming up over the next little bit?
Yeah, we're working on a new show, actually. We just had the 6th episode of it drop on YouTube yesterday. It's called Top Shelf. It's basically a variety show, so not your typical podcast. We got trivia. We have sort of a wraparound segment where we go around and it's a roundtable discussion. I have my own segment on there where I talk about some of the reporting I'm working on. So if people listening and watching are looking for something a little different and something that's, you know, kind of taking a tour around the league once a week, check it out. Go to the Scores YouTube channel, and it's called Top Shelf.
Looking forward to checking it out, John. We'll throw a link out in the chat for everyone to pop over and check it out. Great talking with you as always. Enjoy a quieter night in the NHL and all the games heading into the weekend. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Helly for heart. If you need any more advice, I'm here for you.
Right,
Thanks for doing this. All right, there's John Matisz. Always love catching up with John here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. All right, we got just went a little long today. We got to get over to the Coolbet lines. We'll get Remo back in here though, and Remo, I don't know. Have you been paying much attention to the East? Like, it got really tight, really fast.
Yeah, definitely. You know, so much talk about the Rangers bowing out, and you go into the season and say, okay, who made it last year that's not going to be in this year? I don't think the Rangers was on anyone's board. So, okay, who's that opening up a spot for? Well, you know, Washington, a team that limped into the playoffs last year. Well, they're number 1. They're playing pretty well. And a lot of that, I don't know if you saw PLD elevated to line 1 yesterday with Ovechkin and Alexei Protas. Boston taking a step back. You look at the roster, you're like, who are some of these guys? It doesn't look like the Boston Bruins that I remember. So there's the spots open. Columbus playing really well. I know Monahan injured.
That would be the best story in the hockey this year. If Columbus was able to make the playoffs in the aftermath of the tragedy with Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason, It would be amazing for that franchise, and I think it would really be good for the league. And tell you what, Dean Evason's going to get some Coach of the Year love if Columbus can get across the finish line in the top 8.
Yeah, Ottawa making a charge, but how about these two teams? Detroit getting the new coach bump, 7-3 in their last 10, and Montreal, Lane Hudson, what a rookie season he's having, 7-2-1 in their last 10. So there's going to be two pretty good teams, Huss, that don't make the playoffs. You have the Flyers and Pittsburgh in there as well. So who's in there? 48 points, the Blue Jackets, second wildcard spot, but a number of teams not far behind. I think Washington, New Jersey, Carolina, they're going to be in. Tampa, Florida, Toronto. But it's the battle for the final 2 spots. Should go down to the wire. We'll be keeping track a little loosely. You know, we're more of a West city here, following our own ball, but have an eye on what's going on over there.
No, for sure. Don't even bring up the Detroit Red Wings as we get to the Coolbet lines, because their faceplant at home against the San Jose Sharks blew up an absolutely beautiful partner parlay that had Montreal as a plus 130 underdog and St. Louis yesterday. So they might be on the suspended list. There's only 2 games tonight in the National Hockey League. The Hurricanes are in Buffalo to take on the Sabres. Buffalo a plus 154 home dog. Carolina minus 182. Just going to quickly touch on the starting goalies because that line has kind of moved quite a bit. Oh, Dustin Tokarski in for the Hurricanes. Unconfirmed but expected Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen UPL in for the Sabres. And then it's the Oilers in Minnesota against the Wild. And I have to admit, it's a crazy number. Edmonton is minus 220 to win on the road. And Minnesota, who's been so good all year, although only 11-9 at home, while they're 16-4 on the road. Minnesota's plus 185, but it's hard to get past the injuries that Minnesota's dealing with right now. They go into tonight without Kaprizov, but also without Brock Faber, without Jared Spurgeon, and without Jonas Brodin, 3 of their top 4 defensemen. I do like Edmonton to win. I'm actually going to hit the puck line tonight at plus 115. Probably throw that one out for our Coolbet play of the day. Cup odds, if you want to get the Jets before that number goes down, 15-1 right now. And a pretty interesting list. Oilers 7-1, Canes 8, Florida plus 950. Dallas is 10-1, Jersey 11, the Leafs 12, Avalanche plus 1250, Vegas 13-1, Washington 14-1, Winnipeg 15-1. Right now, those are your Coolbet odds to win the Stanley Cup. As far as the National Football League goes, latest lines for the divisional championships, playoff games, I should say. The Chiefs 8.5-point favorites Saturday afternoon at Arrowhead Stadium against the Texans. Saturday night, the Lions are 9.5-point favorites against the Washington Commanders at Ford Field. Sunday at the Link, the Eagles laying 6 to the Los Angeles Rams. Rams plus 220 on the money line if you think there may be an upset. And then the game of the week, the main event of the divisional round, the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen, the 2 likely finalists for the NFL's MVP award going at it. And this is very close to a pick 'em. Baltimore to win, minus 112. Buffalo to win, minus 104. A 1-point spread as well for Baltimore at minus 108. Total in that game, 51.5. But, 3 bigger lines, but as I said, not a lot of change right now. This is as close to a pick 'em with 2 high-profile offenses and teams that we've seen in a long time, Remo. And, I can't wait for the Chiefs game and obviously everything else, but that is going to be the highlight of the weekend, that Baltimore-Buffalo game at Bill Stadium.
Yeah, you're expecting, I think, a lot of points in that one and spectacular play from 2 great quarterbacks. Can this game live up to hype? We've seen some big, high-scoring games. What was it, Chiefs, Bills in the playoffs? But we're getting it early. 3 elite teams in the AFC, so 2 of them have to play now. And I'm sure whoever wins will likely be getting another great game in the conference championship. There's always, 2 awesome contests with assuming the Chiefs win and whoever wins this one. But hey, we'll know this weekend. But yeah, all coming down Sunday night. Ravens, Bills. Both teams who have had a lot of regular season success the last couple of years. Just both quarterbacks having a reputation of not being able to get it done. More so, I think Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, the Bills, they can't get past the Chiefs. Well, one of them will be going home and have to answer more and more questions about, hey, why couldn't you get it done in the playoffs? It's hard to win. Unfortunately, some of these teams are going home.
Yeah, it will be unfortunate for one of those two teams. We knew there was 3 legitimate Super Bowl contenders in the AFC all year, and that was the benefit of the Chiefs getting the bye, playing at home, and getting the Texans this week. Although you still got to go out and do the job. Here's your updated Super Bowl odds right now. The Lions are 3-1; they're the favorite. The Chiefs are plus 350. The Eagles are 4-1. Baltimore is 5-1. Buffalo's plus 550. And then a big gap. Rams 15-1. Commanders 30-1. And the Texans 50-1. What else? We've also got Super Bowl MVP odds right now. And it's kind of funny. We don't have the gap in between Josh Allen and the Bills anymore. Josh Allen plus 550. The Bills plus 550. Lamar, for that part, is 6-1. I think that if you like it, you could probably bet Lamar. If the Ravens do win the Super Bowl, it's very likely that Lamar will be the MVP. And certainly if you like the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, they're plus 350. Hard to imagine the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl and Mahomes not getting the MVP. So maybe there's some value right now for you Chief fans at plus 450. We've got exact Super Bowl outcomes, Super Bowl matchups as well. And then if you go to the bottom for specials, if you're a fan of the Bears, the Raiders, the Jags, the Saints, or the Cowboys,
oh my God.
there are options up and odds right now for the next head coach of all of those teams. Now, I won't go through them all, but I will tell you that Ben Johnson, the OC for Detroit, is minus 250 as the favorite to be the next coach of the Bears. Mike McCarthy, the second choice. The the Raiders is Ben Johnson and Deion Sanders, both at plus 175. Pete Carroll next. Liam Cohen, OC for Tampa, is the favorite for the Jacksonville job at plus 110. There's Ben Johnson again at plus 125. He's everywhere, it seems. Aaron Glenn, DC of Detroit, minus 250 for the New Orleans Saints. And this is the one that blew me away, Remis. The Dallas Cowboys coach opening. Jason Witten is the favorite at plus 125. And then 2-1 for Kellen Moore and 2-1 for Deion. I guess I'm here for Deion getting the Cowboys gig because of the content that would come out of it. I can't believe it's being seriously considered, though. But apparently it is, according to Adam Schefter.
Yeah, Jason Witten, what's he up to? Is he coaching any, or is he doing media? I haven't even heard his name.
One and done in the booth. He wasn't very good, and that was that.
That's funny. Well, I saw the Bears interviewed Arthur Smith as head coach. He was coach of Atlanta last year. This year's the OC for Pittsburgh. That's not a guy that gets a lot of excitement going. So we'll wait and see. Deion, could we see him jump from college to the NFL? Something to watch. And the Cowboys, very fascinating, but I don't know. It seems like whatever happens, it's not going to go well, but it will be, again, fascinating to watch.
You can't turn away. All right, listen, we got to get this pod up. Great stuff today. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And all you podcast listeners, when you get a chance, head on over to the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube. Subscribe and check out what we've going on the video portion of it. Game day edition tomorrow. Jets and the Seattle Kraken WST night. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing many of our friends tomorrow at the game.
Yeah, sorry, I should announce us. The Jets did put out a release that they loaned Dylan Coughlin to the Moose. And I was texting with Daniel Fink. The Moose are very excited. And with the trade today and getting Dylan Coughlin, they added about 70 points worth of defensemen. So they're home for this weekend as well, Friday and Sunday. So we'll talk Moose tomorrow, Jets, Brandon, scheduled with JP VJ as well. So some more great insight coming up on tomorrow's show.
Yeah, and hey, how are we going to do something for some Moose tickets on the website or through the Discord?
Yeah, stay tuned on that. I'll have something for
get on that mailing list, everybody, so you get notified when we're doing things things like that. But we've got tickets for Friday and for Sunday afternoon, and it's going to be fun talking Moose with the Fink coming up, because since the calendar turned, a miserable end to 2024 put in the rear view, Manitoba has 9 of a possible 10 points, 4-0-1, coming off a big weekend with back-to-back wins in Grand Rapids. Capo Kakinen getting his first shutout as a member of the Manitoba Moose. So we'll check in on the Moose tomorrow with Dan Fink as well. Thanks again to all of our sponsors for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk, and thanks to all of you for yours as well. That's going to do it for us. We'll catch you tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a game day edition before the Jets and Kraken, live right here on YouTube on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Have a great night.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.